Friends, this is International REUkraine Forum, and again we are talking about the rebuilding and recovery of Ukraine. I hope everyone has had their lunch. I don't know whether you have enjoyed it, but you have definitely discussed the final part of the previous discussion with gusto. I know that because I was going on the sideline of this forum. I kept hearing some of the sound bites of that. Now is the time to speak about the social contract and about how that is going to impact this recovery of Ukraine. Therefore, with great pleasure, I would like to call upon the stage the Executive Director of the Ukrainian Institute of the Future. Please welcome Mr. Vadim Denisenko. Good afternoon, dear friends. We cannot hear the speaker because of the background noises. Because our time is limited, I will be trying to speak very briefly about the things which, from my perspective, are the most important right now for us. Because today we ought to speak not only about Ukraine's recovery and reconstruction, but we have to think about reimagining Ukraine, because the war has changed everything, and we have to reinvent Ukraine. Because after the war, we'll have the entire regions destroyed, sectors of economy ruined, and we will have to reinvent both towns and villages, because Chernihiv, the way it was before the war, will never be the same. Kyiv, before the war, will never be the same in the future. So, social contract, we have to start talking about that. Any social contract comprises, from our perspective, and now I'm introducing the opinion of the Ukrainian Institute of the Future, so it comprises 5 important things. First, the vision of the future. So the social contract is the answer to the question, what is the future? What are we proud of? What is trust? Trust in the triangle, the human being, business, and the government. What is freedom, and who is our enemy? If we contribute the correct answers to these questions, we will be able to reimagine Ukraine and move in the future. Very briefly about the social contracts, the way that they existed during the time starting with 1991. So 1991, it was the time of euphoria, and the social contract boiled down to a very banal thing which sounded, independence will resolve all problems. Unfortunately, independence in itself cannot resolve anything much. We were not prepared for multiple challenges. 1996, it was the first constitution approved at the time of President Kuchma, and this was the first contract, not so much between the people and the government authorities, but the agreement between the elites of Ukraine. And basically we can say that this was the contract between the oligarchs and the Ukrainian president of the time. And it boiled down to a very special formula. You don't stop us stealing, we don't stop you from not paying taxes. And this contract had a very bad thing, a contempt to the government and the statehood as such. Social contract usually has or implies a counter contract, which meant we like not to pay taxes, but we want to move along to Europe. And what Europe was all about, very few people could imagine that. Then 2005, the first Orange Revolution, and we obtained the contract that wasn't able to alter any basic principles, and it sounded in a slightly modified way. You don't stop us from stealing. We imagine that we are moving to Europe, and we are not stopping you from stealing. So the first edition we have is the EU, so the counter agreement. We like not to pay taxes. We are moving towards the UN, the EU, but without NATO and with Russia. So this played a very evil and bad trick on us, but back then, 2004-2005, the Orange Revolution, basically for the first time ever, we decided that we ourselves cannot resolve our internal issues, and unfortunately we had to resort to external mediators and middlemen who seemingly were able to resolve the situation of 2004. But the reason that we had to involve the outsiders, this played once again a very bad joke on us, because further on we tried to always appeal with the external players and never appeal to ourselves. The cause for that is a separate story. 2010, the pendulum moved into the opposite direction, Kuchma contract, which meant, once again, you're not stopping us from stealing, and we pretend that we are moving towards the EU, we are friendly with Russia. Along with that, the counter agreement, we like not to pay taxes, but we don't want to be subservient to Russia, and every time we will take every opportunity to complain about you to the West. So the idea is that between ourselves, we didn't want to make these alignments and agreements and resolve our problems ourselves. We always wanted to appeal either with the West or with Russia. 2014, the pendulum moved in the opposite direction. And basically, for the first time ever, we departed from the traditional formula of the social contract. In the counter agreement in particular, which said we are dissatisfied with being robbed, we want to pay fair taxes. Nobody understood what fair taxes were all about, and you have to stop stealing and lead us to the EU. And the counter agreement, you are stealing, and they will be zeroing you down. So this was delayed mine explosion. This was the gap between the human being and the society, and the peak of that, the cusp of those events, were back in 2015. So then there was a continuation of the revolution of dignity. Unfortunately, it did not finish in 2014 and 2015, and this brings us to one of the most complicated social contracts. We are unsatisfied that you are robbing us. We are ready to pay fair taxes again. Nobody had an idea what that meant, and you have to take us to the EU. And now is the counter contract, which was the scariest to us. We'll give this boy a chance, speaking about Volodymyr Zelensky, and if he doesn't manage, then we will leave this country. So this was the scariest point. Our institute held a big sociological research in 2021, 5,000 respondents of face-to-face, and it demonstrated a very important point, which was about the fact that we became a political nation, and the 24th of February 2022 demonstrated that clearly. But the gap between the government and the individual was a chasm, was disastrous, and this kind of status quo couldn't exist for a long time. So we will give this guy a chance, otherwise we will escape this country. So this was one of the scariest counter contracts which existed during the times of Ukraine's independence. The 24th of 2022 changed the social contract. It zeroed everything out because we understood that we had one enemy, and this was the greatest unification between the individuals and the government. Now we're beginning to slowly depart from that. So the counter agreement was about the fact we want to win the war, not to lose the recovery. Losing the recovery would mean that we would have to revert to pro-Russian forces, and we will still escape this country. So this is one of the threats which is still looming above the existence of our state. When talking about the key mistakes committed over the last 10 years, because all of these mistakes have been really very much condensed. The first huge mistake. We found ourselves in the situation when corruption was believed to be the greatest problem. Corruption is a derivative of the political situation. It's not a constant. It's a derivative of the political system. I repeat, but they keep saying to us, don't change the political system, but the best way to fight corruption is to establish another anti-corruption body. And if that doesn't manage, we will add another one. So basically, we have 13 anti-corruption bodies in Ukraine, and their efficiency is next to nothing. The second huge mistake committed by us is that we had multi-vector approach, but it's not a reason for us to cheat both of the parties. The experience of Ukraine back in 2022 was the experience of a land that gave lots of promises, but never delivered on all of these promises. Such a state can never be successful, no matter what the conditions may be. And lastly, this is the lack of values to build a state on, something that I started with when talking about pride, future, trust, credibility. So basically all of these basic things that upholds any state were zeroed in many ways, leveled out, destroyed. And if we speak simplistically, we had some laws, we had some notions then we ended up in a situation when there were no laws, no notions of the laws. These were the three global challenges, understanding which or handling which will never be able to move further. Major challenges now and in the post-war period at the governmental level. The first key problem is reverting to the old system of country's governance, getting back to the social contract of 1996 or not amending the constitution. We keep repeating it in our Institute of the Future that our Ukraine's constitution is basically one of the main sources of all of the revolutions that have taken place in this country, because in our constitution it is set out that the prime minister is someone who doesn't enjoy any rights. He cannot appoint or remove anyone from jobs. Our system is built in such a way that in one way or another it A, results in some corruption models, and B, in making preconditions for revolutionary situation. The second condition which will persist being one of the most discussable ones, once again slipping into authoritarianism, because after the war we'll end up having centralized authorities being very strong. Along with that, regional authorities also have to have their own local powers amended and broadened. But you have heard it a lot today when everyone keeps saying central authorities are stealing and regions say, the executive authorities in the center, they say no local authorities are stealing. So unfortunately, we keep being caught in the system of fanatical systems. It's like Dynamo Kyiv fans versus Shakhtar fans when you don't want to hear or know anything else beyond that. Then there is no actual cleansing from pro-Russian forces. I will not dwell on that. Then lack of clear understanding what country, what state we are building. There's no discussion concerning the future. All of our discussion is right now is 700 billion towards the Marshall Plan's implementation in Ukraine. But we fail to understand the principles of statehood building, because throughout 70 years of post-war recovery, there have been lots of different Marshall's Plan. Everybody just reminisces to the German Marshall's Plan, but it all started with principles. There was also Marshall's Plan meant for Afghanistan, and we remember what happened 2 years ago, how that ended up. So without the discussion concerning what country we are building, we'll never be able to move along. And unfortunately, no one wants to engage in this discussion concerning the kind of state that we want to end up having. And we are and will continue being a dotation state. It's a huge challenge, potent one, because basically the elites understand that for the shrinking piece of their pie, they will be forced to fight and surrender some of the national interests. And this will be a major challenge for all of us. Major challenges from the standpoint of the civil society, because we do not trust in the law enforcement agencies and in the judicial system. Facebook courts are going to be the major problem, and ostracism at all levels. The main stakeholders of such Facebook courts will be oriented not at the state, but at a certain entity or institution. The development of the state for them will be preserving the influence of a particular entity, individual, or an institution. So right now they are trying to make sure no one can blame them. So we have a huge number of anti-corruption organizations which say these organizations are not at fault, but the others have been guilty for a long time. Third problem, very low qualification, and especially executive level of the civil society. As a representative of the civil society, I can speak about that in a responsible way. And fourthly, lack of visions for the country with reference to civil society organizations. They do not want to speak about the future. It's much easier for them to discuss the problems which eventually will result in having grant money. What will war change? Major trends. We singled out only 4, but unfortunately there are many more. So these are the core ones. First, we will have to change the first 100 of Forbes list are going to change. The first third of them, new oligarchs will appear. We don't hear about them. We don't know who they are, how they're making money. Secondly, we will end up having a great number of the unemployed. thirdly, a great number of people who will have been through the war and cannot find fulfillment for themselves. And fourthly, acute sense of justice. So when the first wave of euphoria or calmness runs out, it will end up in embitterment of the whole society. So it's right now that we have to start thinking about how to mitigate this level of embitterment. So will it find its form in kinds of insurgencies and rebellions, or can it be channeled differently? So three major issues that politicians will be tasked with. What have you been doing all this time, starting with February 24th last year? Because a lot appeared in Kyiv after the 10th of March, and some of the politicians even in the month of June last year. They still continue being in authority. But this question will still catch up with them. Number two question, are you competent enough to drag us out of this chasm? Do you have competencies and skills, knowledge sufficient for that? Whether we want it or not, in terms of competencies, there will be a great demand for that. And thirdly, do you have the moral right to drag us out of this chasm? So, of course, this is going to be exacerbated by the level of Facebook courts and very low level of discussions in the society. So we will have to go through the corridor of two extremes. On the one hand, this will be populism, extreme forms of extremism, where people will be demanding like 700 billion euros, and we will be distributing this money, and businesses will end up having nothing with no future. But some populistic party will perhaps be able to break through to the Olymp of the power. On the other hand, it may as well be possible that a lot of CSOs will be touting it on us. Some inefficient myth that the invisible hand of the market will handle it all. Nowhere in the history the invisible hand of the market was able to handle out anything. And they will be telling us, no, you have to construct a libertarian model that has never been efficient anywhere in the world, and you'll be happy. Along with that, we have to be conscious of the fact that we need to get back such discussions as are not very interesting ones about taxes and the economy. All of the social contracts, remember, all of them boil down to the fact that we didn't want to pay taxes. Unless, once again, we begin to speak about the importance of paying taxes, and unless we engage in the discussion of the fairness of these taxes, unfortunately, we will once again slip into the period that, like we were back in 1996. So the social contract itself, it usually comprises two things: basic unmodified principles and the things that can be amended within a certain framework. What do I mean by that? The best example that can serve us here is the social contract signed or devised by the Poles before the collapse and disintegration of the Soviet Union. They got together and adopted two simple decisions. First, no matter who comes to the power, moving towards the EU accession remains unchanged. And the second point that very few understood, at least in our vicinity, they took the decision that they will have to refuse from claiming territories from Ukraine or Belarus, because Ukraine is a fantastic buffer zone between Poland and the Russian Federation. So basically, as experience testifies to that, this was a very qualitative change 30 years later. Therefore, we have to make an agreement concerning basic, unmodified things that have to remain entrenched for the next decades. From the standpoint of our institute, these have to be. Before we talk about that, one typical mistake is that the guarantor of this agreement must only be the president, the only one stakeholder. This is not functional, because as soon as such a person is re-elected, like Saakashvili in Germany, this model is rendered invalid.
What are the preconditions for these agreements on basic principles? I will tell you later. First, we need to ensure illustration for Russian politicians, for a limited number of Russian politicians. If we say let's illustrate 10,000, we will get back to the illustration of 2014, which ended with nothing. So we can't do that with 100 or 200 people. Up to 10,000, but we need to ensure strong discussion, as a result of which we need to come up with a certain, the following thing. Russian language is out of discussion because this state was split. We only our nation was split because of two things: the pipeline and Russian language. Number two is the full revision and change the anti-corruption policy of Ukraine. As of today, we don't have anti-corruption policy. We have 13 anti-corruption bodies that imitate fighting corruption. What should be basic principles on the perspective of Ukrainian Institute for the Future? Proximity of the people and the state. On the second year of war, unfortunately, we're getting back to the process where people start to get farther away from the state. Getting rid of Russia in everything, that's pretty comprehensible. Number three is getting closer towards partnership with main organizations of the collective West and being ready to give up the part of sovereignty. And one of the key things for the West is LGBT, gender, and inclusivity related issues. Liberty as a basic principle to create a state and the rule of law, and ensuring that violation of the law is persecuted. The last thing is state as a frontier fortress. The new social agreement should be the following. There are main things: the future, economically, technically, and military. We have to be integrated into collective Western trust, anti-paternalism, liberty. This is the basic prerequisite of our state. We are a country of free people. This is the quotation for Mr. Chernobyl, who was our late candidate as a president. And so pride and enemy. Our enemy is corruption in Russia. We need to understand that the power is the driver of this social agreement when there is a threat. External stakeholders drive the country to creating new social agreements only when something is a threat for their influence. And civil society and mass media, they drive the society to new social agreements. And everybody is, at this point, is happy with the status quo. It's very easy to talk about corruption without not doing anything. So what do we need to do to make sure a new social agreement is in place? Number one, we need to approach this in terms of agenda theory, which says that mass media, and we will expand that, and civil society doesn't change public opinion. So people, they are moving to a different social media just to reconfirm their points of view, and it's relevant for 80% of people. But a civil society organization, they can push the agenda, and the key thing on the first step is the agreement between 200 or 300 people that represent large groups that say we are ready to give up our comfort in order to push certain agenda. On the second stage, if we succeed in pushing that agenda that I already talked about, if a politician understands that the agenda is changing, they will start talking about that because he needs people to vote for him. And it sounds fantastic, but it's possible. Number three is the big stage agreement between 20 or 30 key people that have authority, people that have a lot of influence, scholars and businessmen, they can reach an agreement about rules of the game. If we do it, we can restart Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you. More applause. I think we can definitely see that we have a lot to work on and we have a lot to do. Maybe at some point during that speech we had some optimism, some hope, and you just think to yourself, how many years need to pass until we really feel as a until we're proud of ourselves as a nation? And thank you for that. We will continue that. And right now, first, I would like to ask you about whether you have any questions. Do you have any questions? Yeah. Use the mic, please. Do you have a possibility to answer one question? Hello, Vadim. Thank you for the presentation. My name is Leonid. I represent organization Makes Sense. And you mentioned that in the future, after we win, we will need to consolidate and identify politicians that have a pro-Russian point of view. And it's not quite clear how we can fight them, because I can already see that Kremlin and Russia prepares informational justification to start influencing Ukraine. So that right now they are getting to the next round. And it's very important for us to know how to deal with them, how to fight these politicians. And I'm also sure that they will change their messages, like they used language or gas pipeline before. So what are their next messages and how do you deal with them? How do you identify them? Well, the language will be the same. The messages the language will stay as a message, and also any economic war is based on tangible things. So it should be a problem. Whatever they talk about, there will be two main messages: language that they will push as an agenda, and they will also support different corruption scandals and promote them, and we create a ground for this. Can I ask you another question? You mentioned that after we win, during the reconstruction, we will have two main enemies: corruption and Russia. If you use populist agenda, well, let's imagine that Russia is gone. Well, this is not populistic, this is not futurologist. It's not going to disappear. Let's be realistic. Russia will still be there. They will be out there. This is just a theory. Thank you. Thanks for the question. Thanks. If you have any more questions, you can reach for Vladimir. And if he stays with us, you can talk to them during the coffee break. There's good news. I would like to announce a speech of one of the speakers. We'll have him as a final speaker, Mikhailo Podolyak. He contacted us and he asked us if we filled in the questionnaire. And I said, just there are a couple of people. And he said, until everyone, each and every person fills in the questionnaire, I will be here and I will have my speech. So this is a short announcement for Mr. Podolyak, head of the presidential office. Now the next session is called Practical Issues of Social and Residential Reconstruction. industrial issues of industrial reconstruction. Organizers has prepared a small surprise for you. It's a small video. Yeah, these are some notes on Ukraine Recovery Conference happened in June in London. It was recorded by David Russell, head of London office in project management and national security from AECOM company. It's a consulting company that deals with infrastructure. They solve hardest challenges around the world, and this is the company that is engaged as an advisor company to rebuild Ukraine. It will be in English, but our translators will create a translation for you.
It's a pleasure and an honour to be speaking with you today. I'd like to thank the organisers of this event for giving us this opportunity to speak with you and discuss some of the key points that we found from the Ukraine Recovery Conference that took place in London on the 21st and 22nd of June. I'd just like to point out these points were taken from notes made during the conference and afterwards and are for information purposes only. They do not represent the official AECOM views or positions or those of other attendees, and obviously do not capture all of the issues that were discussed during that two-day conference, but hopefully they'll give you a flavour of some of the topics that were discussed at that time. The aim of the conference was really to drive support for recovery by encouraging businesses and industries both to get involved and crucially to invest in the recovery efforts. One of the key outcomes from the conference was the signing of the Ukraine Business Compact by over 400 businesses in 38 countries, and that just underscores the extent of which international business wants to support Ukraine and the recovery efforts. One of the key elements that was recognised at the conference was the need for good government-to-government agreements in order to set the conditions to allow businesses to work within Ukraine. So at this time, AECOM signed a memorandum of understanding with the Ministry of Communities, Territories and Infrastructure Development. Others have since signed similar sort of agreements, and again, this sort of understanding and agreements with the government really encourages international businesses to get involved in the reconstruction efforts. Funding was also a key area of discussion, and there's a recognition again that international donors, whether that's World Bank, European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, USAID, or indeed foreign national donors, are going to be absolutely central to the recovery efforts, and that money is flowing in all the time. During the conference, there's big pledges made, including 3 billion in loan guarantees made by UK government. One of the initiatives that's been established to control that money is by BlackRock and JP Morgan, who are going to help establish the Ukraine Development Fund, and that will really control the flow of donor money in order to support the reconstruction efforts. Again, one of the key points that we found coming out of that was actually that the reconstruction will be an engine to get the Ukrainian economy back into shape. Obviously, everybody's keen to see the reconstruction works progressing as quickly as possible and using that international funding to bolster the Ukrainian economy. There's a recognition that construction and reconstruction is needed across multiple sectors. In fact, pretty much every sector is going to have to be looked at on some form of construction and reconstruction effort in there. Some of the key headline facts and figures that were discussed at the conference on some of the sectors, for instance, transport. They talked about the repair and construction of 24,000 kilometres of roads and 5,300 kilometres of railway tracks that will need to be repaired or rebuilt. On the aviation sector, there is a desire to increase freight capacity, obviously hugely important in the reconstruction efforts, but also rebuilding the passenger capacity as hopefully people return back to Ukraine. The reports in maritime, and they're expected to see a complete programme of restoration and modernisation of the ports, which will cost around $190 million every year for the next 7 years. Again, huge programme there. On the borders, they're looking at repair and construction of 21 priority checkpoints. The priority ones predominantly around EU borders, just to help secure and ease that cross-border trade and movement. And in energy, Ukraine was stated as wanting to lead Europe in renewable energy, and are going to take great strides in trying to become leaders in that. And there's also a desire to move away from the old Soviet standards and move towards more European and UK-based standards. This is all part of the Build Back Better, which is the mantra Ukrainian government are using. So we're going to leapfrog from old Soviet standards back to the very latest European and UK standards. And there's also a recognition that Ukraine is very much a digital society, and they want to capitalise on that. And so everything is now with a focus towards digitisation and moving forward and improving. And I think probably the key takeaway from the conference is that international companies are looking for local Ukrainian partners. They're very keen to support Ukraine reconstruction and also very keen to work with local partners. So I would encourage everyone to reach out to local and international partners, and you'll find everybody is very welcoming on that and looking forward to working with people in Ukraine. Thank you very much for your time. And if anyone's any questions, then I'm sure you can pass them through to the organisers, and they will pass them on to me and the AECOM team. Thank you very much. Take care.
These were some outtakes from David Russell from the London office in project management and national security of AECOM. In a minute, we will be discussing how economical growth should look like to ensure efficient restoration of Ukraine, while our technical team is getting ready for the next discussion. I would like to remind you that we will wrap our event at 5 o'clock with a speech of Mikhailo Podolyak. So get your questions ready for Mikhailo. And I would like to express my appreciation to our sponsor. I already mentioned SiteLink, augmented reality software for construction industry. Using SiteLink, any person from your office can have a phone call and answer a question right on the construction site. On a serious engineering level, it doesn't matter where your team is, in one spot and in a couple of countries at the same time. One more reminder, organizers wanted you to make your contribution to reconstruction and fill in the questionnaire created by the Center for Innovation. So we have a QR code on your badge. Did anyone do that completely? Did anyone complete the questionnaire? Thanks a lot. And to the rest of you, well, thank you in advance. In a couple of minutes, we will have our stage ready for discussion. By the way, what do you think was the greatest, the best question in the questionnaire? So those of you who completed the questionnaire, do you already have some insights? What was the most important thing for you? Okay, everything, like every question is great. Yeah, I got it. Hopefully, it's all useful for you, and this question will definitely have some useful impact on the country. Practical issues of industrial reconstruction. This is the topic for the upcoming discussion, and I'm about to announce. Actually, we had this topic. This was a topic for the previous discussion, and now we will talk about post-war reconstruction, economic growth and reconstruction. I'm inviting the moderator, Anatoly Amelin, the co-founder of economic programs within the Ukrainian Institute of the Future. Your applause. And then the participants are head of the Ukrainian Parliamentary Committee in Economic Growth, Dmitro Natalucha. Deputy head of the Parliamentary Committee in Transport and Infrastructure, Volodymyr Krydenko. Head of the supervisory group, AFI Group, a co-founder of the Ukrainian Institute for the Future, Igor Lyskin. Head and CEO of Metropolia Group, head of the energetics programs, Viktor Kurtev. Marketing director, to Ukraine and Dobrobat program project, Andriy Lakhshtanov. Post-war economic growth and reconstruction is our topic. Can you hear me? Where is Viktor Kurtev? I sit next to him. Okay, he is already busy with reconstructing Ukraine. Well, we have an hour ahead, and we will have a discussion with our honorable audience, and everyone has its own expertise. Now we have two representatives from Verkhovna Rada, Ukrainian Parliament. We have representative of Ukrainian businesses, and active participants, representatives of Dobrobat. So the first question is, so we have an hour, and I will ask you to be pretty brief. Well, I'm just learning Ukrainian, so sorry for that. Just be brief and try to focus on the core of the topic and while trying to expand it. And Mr. Denisenko talked about priorities, and in the context of a social agreement, when we're talking about industrial reconstruction, we understand that these jobs are a possibility for export and import replacement. So can you name 3 or 4 priorities in this sector for the next 1, 2, or 3 years, so that we're on the same page? Who's ready to answer the question? Igor, are you? Will you be the first? Yeah, can do that. I just think that the head of the committee can do that. Well, you already took the mic. Victor will be the last. There's this basic story when we have something in mind and we want to have a discussion, and there are 3 things that I have in mind as priorities. Unfortunately, these priorities, they change, and people focus on the process of the reconstruction, on budgets, on a specific reconstruction. But you need to understand what we need to build or reconstruct, what for, or who for, and what for. And first of all, we need to start talking about people, because, yeah, people are number 1 priority for a number of reasons. Well, first, people is the main value of the country. People are defending us from the enemy. And this is why we need to build a country for them. We need to reconstruct it, and this reconstruction should be priority for people. And What does that mean? We need to create jobs, modern, innovational, effective jobs to make sure people are back from abroad, and so that people, when they are back from the war, they have jobs. And also growth starts with added value. This is the basic law of economy. In order to have to ensure good welfare, you need to produce something with a maximum added value. When you start thinking about these jobs, you need to have a vision of what Ukraine will look like in the future, and you need to find out what you're going to build. When we mention the word reconstruction, doesn't that doesn't have a lot of sense for me, because we already discussed that reconstruction is about rebuilding something that you already had before. And when we start to think, are we happy with this new old stuff? Just makes me want to rename that. Like modernizing or upgrading the country. And I think Ukrainians pay a very high price for rebuilding of the future, so I have to redesign it. And I think it would be a great mistake just to rebuild same schools, same hospitals, same recreation centers that we used to have. Yeah, well, I will elaborate on that. There are only 3 priorities. I would like to focus on a broader answer. And Dmitry, what's your answer? And actually, I would like to remind you that Dmitry was pretty active. I think it makes sense to use that word, lobbyist of industrial parties, localization law, that were relevant for industrial reconstruction of priorities. What are your priorities for the reconstruction of the country, or maybe constructing a new country? What are the priorities from your point of view? Yes, we can talk about added value and importance of redoing that, but one priority is the speed priority. And I think everything that the country is about to do in the next 10, 12, or 15 years, it should be as fast as possible. We have to give up everything that were a constraint for us before 2022. And the ultimate question is, does this make us speed up? Quick country is the word here. The next question is to Volodymyr Krydenko, Deputy Head of the Committee on Transport, the Parliamentary Committee. And what are your 3 priorities, to your opinions, about in the context of reconstruction? We will use the new terminology. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to see you all during this serious meeting. I see lots of experts, lots of politicians, activists here in the room, and I think technological aspect is defining here. If we want to be competitive, we understand that we have to be a step ahead in terms of technologies, and only this technological aspect can bring us to the next level that help us develop, earn money, and be competitive. Thank you. Andrei Lokshtonov, Marketing Director of Hilti Ukraine. What are your 3 priorities? Hello, everyone. Hello again. I already said hello to many of you. Happy to be here. And additionally to what was already said, to my opinion, people are the main priority in a broader sense of that word. So for whom we are building, and people who are behind this reconstruction And what I mean here is certain skills, knowledge and expertise. Resources and technologies is the priority number 2. In order to reconstruct it the right way, we need to ensure that. And I will keep reiterating that. And I think it's the right way to do that. Build back better is something that the essence of the conference, and the panelist, one of the panelists said, what is the best way to translate that in Ukrainian? Well, I think it's going to sound something like reconstructing this better than we have and we used to have. And number 3, we keep talking about that today, and I'm pleased that we're ready to be honest, and we are not avoiding issues of corruption and transparency. So number 3 would be transparency and avoiding the elimination of corruption. And also, it's still a first round. What do you think? What are the 3 priorities for you, or priorities for construction of new Ukraine? What are these? Hello? Well, historically, I'm mostly focused on energy, the bigger energy sector, and you know that well. And our company, and I personally have lots of ambitions, and we don't have enough population in the country. So this is why I would focus on expansion. And in this philosophy, considering the processes that started since the hot phase of the war started, considering geopolitical, economical, and energy balance of Europe, and the position of Russia that it held before the war started, considering the decarbonization trend that was created using international agreements like Paris Agreement and the Green Deal and so on, this is a huge area for a new, efficient, and fuel-less and decarbonized energy sector that creates great opportunities and proper Ukrainian targeting or creating goals that doesn't solve specific problem, but ensures expansion and aims at replacing Russia at European, international, and regional markets. And this will be a synergy if the new energy reaches that expansion pace with the right industrial policy that ensures localization and generation of services around these growth points will multiply the effect for all other industries of economy. I think this is the right goal to focus on. And we have the next round of questions. I will ask you a question individually because you have different expertise. And I hope that we will have enough time for the third question. And the next question is for Dmytro Nataluhin. We do understand that Ukraine economy lost a lot. Around 8 million Ukrainians are outside of the country. And the survey shows that not all of them are planning to get back. While people are a very important resource for the economy, Ukrainian economy lost 30%, and we don't have the right capital market. And what is the new system? What will be the new economical policy? We started discussing with you this quick state as one of the elements. What needs to be done to become the successful Ukraine? You are head of one of the parliamentarian committees, and a lot depends on us. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. The situation, to put it softly, is demanding and difficult because we have a very limited access to external capital. Internal capital is also short. We have a problem with human resources, and we can't say that we have some fantastical recipes concerning how to get out of the situation. We do have a few options available. First one being continuing to engage and attract foreign capital in the form of grants. The second option is free inflation emissions, like during the time of COVID, when be reminded of the experiment conducted, highly successful, with the help of DIA portal. You could also use your purposeful money for the sake of going to the cinemas or buying books, and this enabled us to preserve economy from different inflation hikes. By the same token, the National Bank of Ukraine, using the digital hryvnia, we can also make purposeful targeted emissions of money for the sake of implementing certain projects. Yet again, here we need approval gained from the IMF and different international partner organizations, etc. We also believe that there is a third pathway, which is also worth paying attention to. Somehow it's not much talked about. This is the speed of money circulation, or velocity of money as it's commonly referred. So the point is that when you have 500 hryvnias in your possession and in 1 week it participates in just one transaction, creating a certain volume of goods, services or work, it's not enough. If in 1 week it participates in 100 different transactions, this would definitely increase the output 100-fold. As products, as end products, being the final implementation of these transactions. So from macroeconomical standpoint, the faster money revolves and circulates, and the greater is the number of transactions that this money features in, the less this particular system or our country will be dependent on external need to be donated to. So this is macroeconomically speaking purely. Therefore, the secret from our perspective is unblocking the speed, increase it, its intensity, amplify it, and to increase the number of transactions whereby Ukrainian money will be able to physically participate in these transactions. How can that be achieved? Because digital money, I know how that functions. For example, the term of validity is 2 years. So if you have some money paid to you within this 2-year period, you will be using this money to spend it for your goods and services. Here we approach transactional costs. So corruption is a transactions cost. Slow customs is another one. Slow courts is another example of that. That is to say, licenses that take me 3 years to obtain, yes. So comprehensively, the overburdened, cumbersome taxation system is also a transaction outlay, because all of them either force you to hire an empire of lawyers to handle a great multitude of problems, or hire an army of bookkeepers, accountants, or just waste your money in queues and lines, a time which otherwise you would be using productively. So the matter of economic growth has always been about the proficiency and efficiency of labor resources, etc. So all of these transactional costs, they transform into bottlenecks, and they have to be shed, get rid of. That's something that we call deregulation, but this is a matter of new services. So every time you log on DIA or Monobank and do a certain transaction, it seems to you that you are just dealing with your telephone, but in fact you are dealing with the state, with the government. This is the best demonstration of what a speedy country or a speedy government may be, just 4 clicks. Like, you mean the state in the mobile phone, paying taxes, paying all of your utility bills. But that's what the president spoke about. Customs without customs officers, taxation without tax inspectors. Yeah, but it can also be perceived in the following way, from my perspective. Just imagine a propeller of an airplane. When it's static, when it's not moving, you can see it very clearly. It does not create any additional value, any added value. No gravitation, no force to pull the plane up. When it begins to propel as fast as it can, it becomes very transparent, and then it pulls the plane upwards. So the task of the speedy state is to make the state so speedy that it disappears in its efficiency. Our task is to make sure that the propeller of the state activation gets so high that you stop noticing that you are interacting with the state, just like when you are using Monobank or Dia Portal. Cool, thank you, I see. Next question goes to Volodymyr. It's a professional question because transport infrastructure plays a significant role in the development of the whole economic system. Since the beginning of the war, we've been able to see what a dramatic role the railway had to play for relocation, evacuation, replacement of sea thoroughfares with railroads. But now Ukraine doesn't have sufficient scheme, and we don't have the clear vision concerning how transportation system will be integrated into the European or the world system of transportation logistics. Is there such a vision? Is there even an attempt made to build the strategy? Indubitably, when we talk about the general strategy that is to be implemented in the post-war time after we gain our victory, certainly there are a few trends that we are tackling. Maritime, river transportation, which is very little engaged, that will enable us to do our transport, to do our goods, to make it possible for our goods to be traded. So right now, when we're speaking about a situation when aviation is next to nothing, our airports are constantly targeted by airstrikes, and our river ports cannot work at the optimum settings because they are nearly ruined. Understandably, we have forwarded them as concessions, but even the ones that have been modernized, they are being occupied and cannot be used right now. When talking about the railroads, this is the major way of transporting both cargoes and people. Passengers, they feel all of these discomforts when they have to travel to the European Union via Poland, from Kyiv to Warsaw. We waste our time. We understand how inconvenient it is, how discomfortable it is when air conditioners are off and you are scooped in your compartment for 3 years waiting for your wheels to be changed. Ideally, of course, we can talk about building narrow tracks. But the question is, but these are billions of dollars, and where can that be gained? Yes, you're definitely right. So when talking about time efficiency, we have to utilize contemporary approaches. For example, formerly we used a special mechanism, a Polish one, which enabled us to change from 15 and 20 to 30, 35 parameter. This did not always function smoothly. There were a lot of complaints against this mechanism, but at least it allowed us not to wait these 4 hours, not to create these lines and queues for trains, particularly when we talk about business people who were willing to transport their cargoes via railroad tracks. As of now, we have a company called Talgo, based in Spain, which has this contemporary mechanism to change the breadth, the width of the rail tracks on the movement, on the go. You don't have to stop and wait. At the speed of 15 kilometers, with the help of this mechanism, it's possible to change the width of the rail track. So the question is, how long will it take us to start building other cars, train cars? Because we are hopeful that next year the war will be over, ports will be reopened. Who will be covering for all of these costs incurred? If we introduce the Spanish Talgo system at our borders, this will be very quickly recouped, and a lot of entrepreneurs are willing to invest their money. So private entrepreneurs, you mean? Yeah, definitely, and it's very easy to reimburse this money. You don't have to wait, you don't have to change these wheels even, you see, in order not to overburden the freight. Because in many situations we have to re-upload cargoes into other cars for them to travel across Europe. But with Talgo, it's possible to exercise these contemporary approaches, and the implementation of this Talgo technology in particular can result in the fact that in just half a year it will be fully manageable and workable here in Ukraine. It's just a matter of negotiations at the highest level to implement and involve these mechanisms and these trains into Ukraine. Let me revert to another question. What is the role and the strategy which the transport infrastructure is to play in the years to come? Because we started by talking about reconstruction, now we are also talking about building anew. Ukraine hasn't been involved in the logistics globally. We are not members of Baltic states, etc. So where is Ukraine and where should it be? Where is its place in this future? Because you're the head of this profile committee at the parliament. When talking about restoration of transport and aviation, which plays a significant role because everyone wants to travel somewhere speedily, efficiently, and of course aircraft is the best means in terms of money, time versus the water or highways. So this opens up a wonderful opportunity also for us to open up new riverways and gateways to join Ukraine and link it to other European areas. Well, if we restore our plane building, aircraft building, if we talk about opening new routes to link Ukraine to the United States, Canada, etc., the prospects are multiple. There's a lot of work to be done, and there are specialists available, but the only thing which is wanted is to implement this as soon as possible and to get through to our Western partners for them to support us at beneficial levels. We need some benefits. We cannot do it in market terms. There are a lot of projects that we have been studying since 2014. Remember this project 3Cs? This is something that would connect us to the Baltic states and then on to the Scandinavian countries. You probably remember back from history, the countries that were stationed at the junctures of these riverways or seaways, they would always earn a lot of money. So this is down to logistics. The shorter is this logistics to the markets of sales, the greater priority it becomes. So this part of India and Baltics, because they are forecasting that India in some 20 years is going to become at least the second greatest economy in the world. Is this something that you are discussing in the parliament? Is this something that the cabinet of ministers is responsible for? Are you in any way to impact on that? Well, of course, we have a role to play because we are urgently requiring some changes in terms of management, because we have a lot of divisions right now. The railway is like a monopoly. In Ukraine, there's no competition. There is no competition between the parts which run passenger freight versus cargo freight, infrastructure, management. All of this is basically lumped into one budget item, and then it's difficult to understand how is the money paid, where the money is short. Talking about the railway the Ukrainian railway, I can tell you that this is not exactly right, because I'm a member of this supervisory board, and we understand where everything goes. But you're saying it exactly right. Competition is required, and transportation strategy of Ukraine, which is part of the national economic strategy, needs to result in this. But now it goes to you as the legislature of Ukraine, because you set the strategic orienteers. I understand that you are defending the management of the Ukrainian railway. Understandably, the Ukrainian railway is doing so much during this war, transporting both humanitarian and military cargoes, as well as cargo circulation is maintained in that way. But changing legislation in cooperation with experts, managerial bodies is there, and the European bodies say that the laws have to introduce amendments, make this management more transparent, not so bulky. It has to be leaner. It cannot be a state within the state. Everything has to be clearly understandable, technologically transparent. So, understandably, all of these strategies approved by the Profile Committee and the Parliament of Ukraine are being worked on. This is constant work in progress concerning what the Profile Ministry is busy working with. Of course, we would like these reforms to roll faster and all of these negotiations to go more speedily. And in this respect, both the Parliament of Ukraine and the Profile Committee are always standing on the ready to support them. Thank you. Next question goes to Andriy, because you are a representative of Hilta Ukraine company, which manufactures equipment for repair works, right? These are tools. So my question is whether you have any manufacturing facilities here in Ukraine. No. Then the next question is, restoration and then building the country anew will require a great number of both instruments and machinery, equipment. So what's your vision? Does Ukraine have these possibilities to establish manufacturing facilities to produce all of these tools and equipment? What does the government have to do, perhaps the government at the parliamentary level? Very cool question indeed. Briefly, in answer to your question, yes, of course. Whether in Ukraine there are these opportunities, yes, they are available. That I heard, thank you. Let me expand on it a bit. It's not just so. For me, it's a reality, which is inevitable, because territory-wise, geography-wise, when talking about costs and labor costs, the number of people who are ready to work and the extent to which they are ready to commit, I think that this has to be something which is right now unfolding in the Czech Republic and Slovakia. You probably know about that. But yes, but first they created conditions. There was a whole governmental program to attract investments and compensate capex, etc. Yes, and it's very good that we are articulating all that, because it's important for everyone to hear and understand, not just let's wait until this becomes a reality. All of us are representatives of different industries. For us to understand each other, find some common ground, and understand what needs to be done for this to become a reality. What factors will contribute to this? Well, construction as an industry, this is my conviction, it conveys a certain economic derivative. That is to say, growth of demand for certain goods, manufacturing, building of housing, office facilities, because all of the infrastructure has been destroyed here in Ukraine. Of course, there will be a huge demand for building materials, instruments, etc. This goes without saying. Even without the strategy for intensive development, even rebuilding all of that will be a huge, potent market. Yes, you're right, and even us, a company that doesn't have any manufacturing facilities in Ukraine, but has manufacturing sites across the board of Europe and elsewhere, I know that among us are also multiple representatives of Kovalska, for example, the Ukrainian concrete producer and some other mates, we have been communicating about all of these issues. I would like to rephrase this. Are we ready for that? We, us being Ukraine.
And I will be honest, no, we're not ready for that. And you were the right to say, I absolutely support you here. If we expect us to win, and I do expect us to win, maybe next year, maybe this year, we expect it to happen as fast as possible. But being ready to this sort of reconstruction logistically, in terms of volume and production, I mean, in order to be ready for that tomorrow, we had to be prepared. We had to start to prepare ourselves yesterday. And the forum that and the event that we've created. Actually, I would like to note that Andrei was an active participant of Dobrobat initiative, and you participated in the launch of many initiatives and projects. And this is the platform that should generate that change. If we expect something to happen tomorrow and we're not ready for that, that's not going to happen. And we need to listen to each other. And one more thing, very briefly. You see, I'm absolutely sure that this conference is not about talking. We're not here to have a conversation. We have specific procedures and things that we want to happen. Either we discard it and or reconfirm it, and then after that event we need to come up with certain agreements. And what kind of agreements between each other? For example, yesterday we had a meeting with Vladimir and we discussed certain things. We will not discuss that today, but we had certain agreements about further steps. Well, first, we are citizens of this country and we want to create, to make Ukraine according to our dream. If we open our constitutions, that means we are beneficiaries, owners of that country. We are citizens. This is our common asset and this is our common future. Yeah, absolutely support you here. And we need to take that responsibility. And it's not just about meeting and having a conversation. It's about having a responsibility for doing certain steps and making certain decisions. And we will monitor that and make sure everything, and make sure they happen and they have certain results. My question is for Igor Liska, our interpreter. And during the full-scale invasion, you kept rebuilding and building new factories. And we've just listened an opinion of representative of a foreign company. And you're a representative of a local investor. Why are you doing that in Ukraine, not outside? And the second question, what should be changed in the state policy to make sure that foreign companies, keep coming to Ukraine? I think this is a choice of every citizen. This is your commitment as a citizen, rebuilding what was destroyed by Russian missiles. This is my personal contribution into our victory. And it's no secret that 38% of that money is taxpayers' money. And we also support our armed forces 100%. These also 62% of money that they receive from international partners, it doesn't support armed forces. This is what we do. These are millions of taxes. And basically what we contribute is like a smaller battalion. This is the amount of our support to armed forces. And I'm not that of an optimist in terms of our victory. I think this faith in our armed forces is more or less religious, and I think we relaxed and we gave up too early. And if we speak about victory when we fall back to our borders in 1991, and for my personal opinion is that victory is peace, no shellings, no hostilities, and we're joining NATO and the European Union. This is what I call victory. And in order to make it happen, I'm inviting you to my plan. Don't wait for the victory. Start rebuilding Ukraine right now. Starting with yourself, starting with your company, starting with your friends, putting pressure on the government in making change. And this is the way of the warrior. We have to become warriors that have only one way, like a samurai. We don't have a goal. There is only the way. There is no goal. Yeah, I mean, we're not Japanese, we're Ukrainians. But live your life, keeping in mind that this war may be ongoing, and do everything to ensure victory and keeping Ukraine in mind. Keep building and keep designing your projects, technological projects, innovational projects with high added value. You have to start doing that right now. And this really sounds impossible, like some science fiction, but if you have a realistic project, if it's built on economic things, like I'm considering constructing school projects, like certain people who used to work in school in one of the oblasts. They escaped from the war, but in order to get back, there are certain prerequisites. They need jobs, they need schools, and this is what I'm asking you for. Don't focus on reconstruction. Maybe we don't need to reconstruct the school that was destroyed during the war, some village school. You don't have to create the same thing and invest these millions into something that is not needed. You need new energy. You need to redesign the urban infrastructure, and we need to build the new Ukraine that Ukrainians will look into, go into, and Ukrainians are pretty much spoiled. They've seen a better life. They've seen better standards, and we need to compete for that. We need to create businesses that will compete with European businesses when we join the European Union, because so for you as an entrepreneur and investor, the question was a bit different. If you or maybe some investor plans to build high-tech production and he's looking for a country, the best country to do that, they need to choose Ukraine. And I have a good example, a bad example. So what do you think? What we need to change in order to make sure that such investor that is looking to invest $100 or $200 million, well, first we need to grow up. Because if you have an illusion that tomorrow, somewhere in Ukraine, maybe near Poltava, they will create a semiconductor company or factory. That's an illusion. Or Boeing is going to build a factory near Kramatorsk. Well, I mean, nobody's thinking about that. Yeah, but what does it mean to grow up? The way I make my decisions, what Ukraine will definitely import. This is what we're paying our dollars and euros for. Do you know that 100% of glass, we're importing 100% of our glass from Russia and from Belarus? That's what we did before the war. So we have this quartz sand. It's no rocket science. We need to build a factory that will compete with Polish factories when the borders will be open, and also consider the capital and the people. Yes, we need to be independent in order to import. Not right now we're importing, but to be independent, we need a good team, we need a good design, and we need to look for a project like that. And sorry for being cynical, we definitely have one of the biggest weapon market. So we need to start building high-tech military production. And it's a shame, because I used to promote a project like that. And there is a war in Ukraine since 2014, but we don't have a shell production. We don't produce rounds, ammunition, and we need to prepare for that. We need to prepare ourselves to support our army. This is some basic stuff, and it's ridiculous. Even considering modern technological production, it's like 2 production lines. It's like 2 workshops like that. This is how you build a new innovation technology. And it's no rocket science. It's not building something from scratch. But starting with basic things that we will definitely need and use. We are not the first or second army in the world, but this is a brand anyway. Let's use it. And getting back to my favorite topic with agricultural production, I think that we need to grow up here. And during the war, we need to realize that you can't just transport grain or corn. You need to understand how it should be processed. Flour or starch, and we built a factory in Vidnova, and this is what we used to discard. We're importing that, exporting that to Europe, and we need to think about that. We're exporting $25 million. That's clear export. That means currency, that means taxes, and also jobs. Yes, we have 30% of Ukrainians that are unemployed. If we grow up, if we stop dreaming and start doing our homework for the next 10 years, we'll be able to build hundreds of factories. But we need minimum 4 million people that are now in Europe. And most of that people, they left eastern Ukraine that was destroyed. And you don't necessarily rebuild that. These old Soviet factory, they need to build a new industrial factory. And then after 10 years, as Mr. Natalucha mentioned, rightfully, you need to do that very quickly. And then after that, we can start dreaming about spaceships, about Antonov planes that will compete with Boeing, and semiconductors, or blockchain. And a lot of people say that our focus should be blockchain. Well, what are you talking about? We need to just care for people. We need to provide them with jobs that we will pay for. Thank you. And I'm giving the floor to Victor. And I have two questions for you. And the first one, unfortunately, is not about long-term future. It's about short-term future. Can you please provide us with a short answer? Are we ready for the upcoming winter? I know you're a specialist in energy and balance, because this means a lot for Ukrainian economy. We remember how Ukrainian companies were in a situation of energy shortage and blackout. And the second question, which is more important for me, what about the concept that we've been discussing, building new instead of rebuilding? So what Ukraine should do on the European markets? You started talking about that, but please elaborate on that and speak specifically about strategic goals, because nowadays we have energy strategy 2050, as far as I remember, but they don't have specific goals. So the floor is yours. Well, about the first question, upcoming winter will be hard. Massive shellings and missile attacks, it's not a project threat, and there are two sides to this war. We're learning, and our enemy is learning. I've been actively participating for the last 2 years in the protection of our critical infrastructure, and I'm one of the authors of the idea of preemptive unloading of our energy system. Well, just add that this idea helped us save lots of power. After the 23rd of November last year, when we had a complete blackout and we lost a lot of megawatts in the system for a few minutes, we built a system of this preemptive unloading. When the missiles are in the air, we start to unload the system, getting it ready for the attack. And on the 5th of December, 16th, 31st, and then January, the last one was the night of 9th of March, when it was birth of our poet Taras Shevchenko. And we survived. And we survived the biggest bombing of critical infrastructure. We've survived. And I can tell you that with this sort of intensity, any energy system would not survive, like the one in Germany, like the one in France. We had some redundancy because our energy system was built using Soviet standards, and we were waiting for the Third World War, nuclear war, and had to withstand that sort of war. But if you put these attacks on the map, it's going to be, our map would be red. Maybe we'll have enough time to build something. Something cannot be rebuilt, and they don't produce that amount of transformers that we've lost during the previous season. This is why the winter will be hard, but I think we will survive. I have a lot of criticism against the preparation process. We need to consider that the enemy is very smart. They will do everything to reach their goals. And I have lots of criticism to the existing leaders of the energy sector. I've been writing articles, and I talk about that on TV, but let's not talk about negative things. So it's going to be hard, but we will survive. Number two, as far as the future is concerned, for the previous month, I've published 2 big articles on my Facebook page and also on the Khvila website. I have a blog there, And the first one was called the strategy of decline, and the second one was called London and emptiness. So this it's a sort of a politically correct criticism of what was presented in London, what were the mistakes, and why it's not going to work. And the main thing I would like to mention in these articles, there is nothing bad in ambitious plans. What plans? Ambitious plans. And together with Anatoly, with Igor, as part of the Ukrainian Institute for the Future initiatives, we had this project to create a development plan for Ukraine. This complex plan or strategy had different components. It had industry strategies for industries like energy and so on. And I participated in transport strategy.
Anatoly authored the idea of Ukraine's GDP amounting to $1 trillion US. Later on, it became mainstream. There's nothing wrong about that. However, inside myself, inside Ukraine, these plans shouldn't conflict each other. All of the field, territorial, macroeconomic, and other kinds of plans have to be implemented. They need to be fulfilled. Unfortunately, we brought to London highly ambitious, beautiful, beautiful pictures. Our partners were able to spot that. I am politically critical, but the vision of the top strategy level, then the implementation at the field and industrial level implementation, territorial implementation of these strategies all the way down to the meters, cubic meters and megawatt of energy. All of this requires rigorous planning. This is the first thing. And the second obstacle, something that Andrei has talked about that today, our absorption capacity, ability to internalize money. Money is like cement, meant to bind together different resources. So where's this idea coming from that over the last 6 years, when we had to 10 to 16 billion US dollars to absorb, and now that we have lost dozens of billions of our population, will be able to internalize twice as much money within the next 5 years? Where are our constructors, builders, architects, designers, licensure system of the state for the whole ecosystem? We are incapable so far to fulfill these transformation projects of the scale. And our absorption capacity needs to be worked on. These are parallel processes, so that our throughput of the state to internalize all of this money, to absorb all of this money, has to grow in line with the tempos to internalize this money. We still have some 5 to 6 minutes left. And I would like to ask one more question, if I may. 3 minutes. Not a lot. Then I have a very short question and a very short answers from you, if you please. We started by saying that the main priority, and a few of the panelists have said about that, is human capital, it's the people. And talking about building anew, we keep asking ourselves whether they will be coming back. So my pithy question to you, and I suppose that you will be also answering to the point in a pithy way. So why do people have to get back? Very briefly, 1, 2 statements, that's all. Who will be first? Metro. Because here it will be possible, but elsewhere will be impossible. Osama love it. Who's next? I suppose people need to come back because it's their homeland. They're wanted here, sorely needed. This is their homeland, just to keep it short. And a brief comment to add. This directly relates to your question. As for me, our discussion is really ambivalent, which isn't bad. I don't agree with all of the speakers. Unfortunately, we don't have time to engage in discussions. Nevertheless, let's do all we can to build our country better. And if we have gathered here and we are involved in this land and in these fields, we have to feel responsibility for this. So the first step, small possible steps. Let's agree that our today's event, the organizers perhaps will get through to you, some of you, and we will be agreeing some small steps as follow-ups to what we have been discussing here. What needs to be done further? People will be coming back because this is their homeland. They don't have another one. Thank you. Who's next? Igor, Volodymyr. I am somewhat more pragmatic in my approach. People don't owe anything to anyone, and I don't think it's right to think otherwise. People will be coming back if we can build here a just, interesting, high-quality Ukraine with high standards of living and great opportunities to fulfill themselves. Only then will they come back. Thank you. Volodymyr. My point is that people will come back when there is security in the country, when they feel that they are protected, defended from missiles, bombs, from the government. They will be able to build back their housing and construct their own future. I have a lot of mates and acquaintances who went abroad and said, well, we feel strange, foreign, alien there. Of course, the potable water is better, the infrastructure is better, but the soul and love for this country tags us back here. And we keep coming back because we are under no illusions that the day after we gain our victory, Ukraine will become highly technological, will overpower corruption overnight. But people will still be coming back, joining their efforts, because everyone comes to understand that Ukraine's identity, our bravery and courage enables us to keep building and believing in this future. And standing together, supporting one another, planning and disagreeing with each other about some approaches in different discussions, we are also growing stronger. And I'm sure that our people who still remain in Ukraine, they know and believe in their country, they believe in this victory, and this faith, this belief will pave the way to our future. And Victor, you're the last one to speak. Personally, I do not understand the people who have left Ukraine. For example, I'm not looking for comforts. Staying here is my mental choice, conscious choice. Last year, I left Kyiv in June to Bessarabia. I went, which is part of Moldova. I have 5 children, and my plan is to have 12 children, and I'm not going to migrate from Ukraine. So my plans are great. I want to conquer the world, and the resource for that will become the new Ukraine. Super, thank you, ideal, perfect. Wrap up. I would like to thank our fellow panelists and say some statements that we have heard today. So the first purpose for building back and building anew, it's about people, and we see that everyone believes in people coming back. The second most important thing for the building of our country anew is speedy. The speedy state, speedy processes for the functioning of the government. The second part, another part is for us growing up, we have to grow more adult. We believe, because I liked it very much, it's the coolest country with the coolest opportunities and awesome chances for the growth. So let us thank these panelists and let's keep building this new country together. Thank you. We have just analyzed the situation, and we still have an opportunity to hear a question from our audience members. There is always a question, because our audiences are always very active. My name is Pavlo Filipenko. I am the head of Dobrobat in Kharkiv region. I wanted to ask Igor, as an entrepreneur with a lot of experience, what do you think of Kharkiv? If we close all of the borders seal all of our borders with our enemy, then we are in a logistic stalemate. What kind of entrepreneurial development can then be possible in Kharkiv region and in Kharkiv in particular? In fact, I don't know why you are underestimating Kharkiv region even now. I'm not going to make any proclamations, but there are two things that I can say. First, in Kharkiv region, there are deposits, natural deposits. And I'm not going to delve deep into the detail, but we are definitely targeting that. And if we get that, we will set up a manufacturing facility. And second thing that I believe in, it's Kharkiv region, which is technology driven. Kharkiv has a huge educational and technological potential capacity. The only thing is to develop these capacities and to make sure that there are no fake machines to copy diplomas and certificates when they just make money providing some kind of a copy of education to foreign students. However, it's hard to talk foreign students into coming to Kharkiv region for security reasons, but we have to make a technological hub in Kharkiv region, first of all, for the manufacture of munitions. This is no trivial, no banal. However, I cannot say that we have any other opportunities. Science plus industry, industrialization. Other things like real estate, transits. Kharkiv is a very convenient place. It still remains to a certain extent, but we need this added value that can be gained from industrial manufacturing, and Kharkiv region enjoys a fantastic potential. Secondly, we have to see at what we have. We have agriculture, land. So this needs also to be employed for creating added value. Also follow the example of Israel. Whenever nobody speaks about logistics, entertainments, tourism, but first of all, they target security, arms, innovations, technologies, industrialization, followed by all other things. Thank you. We are analyzing our timing as best as we can. And we still have some room for another question, even two questions. We have one raised hand. No more raised hands. Thank you. Here to Ukraine. I have a question not to you, Andriy. I wanted to ask this question at the previous discussion, but now I think it's still relevant. We keep going around different manufacturing sites and facilities, and we get to see that, unfortunately, a lot of professionals are right now on the front line. On the one hand, we seem to see that investors are ready to contribute funding and for the manufacture to continue, but there are no people available to build. I love sports and biathlon. I watch these competitions. But still, if a coach in biathlon tomorrow wants to run a project and build a bridge over the Dnieper River in Rusanivka district, I will never trust them. So are you thinking about how we are going to teach, retrain, reskill, upskill people to create the necessary human capital? So who's ready to answer this question? Anyone? Or perhaps Ms. Natalia, who was a panelist in the previous panel. Well, she can answer at a later point, but I suggest that some of the members of this panel participate in answering this question. We'll definitely have to retrain and reskill because Ukraine needs to change. I definitely believe in that strongly. And I'm a believer that great growth here will start with construction and building, because every invested dollar in construction will contribute at least in $7, sevenfold impact in other industries. So this will create internal added value, starting with construction and ranging all the way to creating different products like crushed stones, different minerals extracted, etc. Secondly, I believe that after the victory, a lot of people will come back. We'll have a great army of people willing to work. But of course, we have to be strong not only in numbers, but in the quality that we will have to deliver. Even in the army, there will be great reskilling and retraining, because we need air defense, analysts, scientists, scholars, that is to say, another level people, because just plain builders will be coming back. But my forecast is that our army will definitely decline. It will shrink twice, but it will be more technological, better skilled, better trained. And to finalize my intervention, that will definitely be a lot of changes in occupations, because this trend started even before the war. But this war became the catalyst and a kind of a switch. This is perfectly okay. Anyone else willing to answer? Yes, I think that this is a question of a systematic approach. In the first place, the government needs to plan for the areas of the future Ukraine where there will be, these areas will be centers and hubs of economic activities, and around these centers will be developed housing opportunities, and given the needs and wants of the centers of economic activity, academia will be growing in order to build different specializations. The government, because of its governmental order for education, understanding this area division and centers, they will understand what kind of specialists that they will need. Something that we have just obtained from the Ministry of Education in terms of the government order for education is disgraceful, because there the majority are humanitarian jobs and occupations. However, high technological occupations, agrarian occupations, they're next to nothing. The second aspect is private business, which will have to come here and rebuild this country. Can I please introduce my comment? Just wait. Maybe some businesses have already entered Ukraine to rebuild this country. My point is that we have vocational schools, which are unfortunately being folded for whatever reasons. And in the first place, because there is a shortage of those who are willing to study there, starting with the Odessa region and other regions in Ukraine. There are examples when local businesses, agrarian businesses make agreements with these vocational schools. They fund the establishment of specific departments and chairs, and they begin to educate people specifically for their business needs. So I think this is going to be running like this, along these lines. A small comment, because, it grates on my ear when they say the government has to create these areas. I think that for me, it's something like the Soviet legacy. So as a representative of the state and government, of course, this is your function. However, follow the living energy, true projects, specific, realistic needs, businesses, the needs and wants in terms of the occupations and jobs, and not just like we are sitting and looking, in Kharkiv region, this will be the kind of area. Why in Kharkiv region? Who is it up to? Just because the governor is more active there, because someone else is taking this decision? So let's make these decisions and initiatives coming bottom up. Let them be grassroots initiatives and not just top down. I agree. A woman and a wife and a husband also create this living energy, but to conceive a child, it requires an additional action. So this action is required. Just observing the energy is enough. Children are not going to be born in this way. And MPs are no representatives of the government. They are representatives of the people. I thought that people are born as a result of love. They are products of love. A very beautiful topic that we have selected. Shall we go on or do we wrap up at this point? There's one more question. I can see another hand raised. Director of an investment company. My question goes to Igor. Can you please recommend sources of funding for recovery, especially for private entrepreneurs affected by the aggression? Briefly, if you may, please.
I don't think the answer will be short, because this is not an easy exercise, but there's basic things. This is what I believe in. Of course, there should be some form of state program, support program, but this is a myth. Everybody thinks that the state owns some money. That's our money. That's not the state's money. So I would like to discard that myth. But there's state reconstruction policy that ensures reconstruction in industrialization of the country. And the first basic source of funding is bank funding and project-focused funding. It's not like you're well off, but here's some money extra. But I'm talking about the project-centered funding. When you don't have a project yet, but you really need that money to keep it going, you have ideas, you have an area, and if you have a good design with a good added value, this is where the state should exercise influence. 32% of bank funding is the state funding, and the way they build their policy, they need to implement that. And it's good that they understand that in the National Bank. I talked to Andrei Pishny yesterday, the day before yesterday, and they're developing the project, the funding project to provide loans for businesses. Are you talking about providing loans or project funding? There's nothing without project funding. If we don't build new projects and new factories, we won't survive. And number three, thanks. I think the last important source of funding is surprisingly foreign support. But who are they going to support? They will support us, but first they are supporting themselves. My experience tells me if you're designing something, you have to do it with a high quality. It should be top quality, using European equipment, not some Chinese substandard equipment. So they will support the manufacturer through us, and we are okay with that on this stage. I'm considering a project, an 85 million euros project for equipment. 75 is financed by Europe. They're financing themselves through that equipment, of course. They have agreements to sign and there's some insurance to do, but they will do that after we win. But these are specific projects, and sometimes it takes more than a year. And in order to do that, you need to start right now. I'll just add that Ukraine allocates a lot of money, around 50 billion euros, but they will provide that money as grants or loans if Ukraine has a strategy to fund its economy, and also there should be a strict control over that money. So they are coming up with a very serious program that will be approved by Europeans, and if everything goes well, we'll have enough funds for project funding. Up to 50% of capital investments can be covered by European money. Maybe we'll have such capabilities in the future. It's going to be a great news, the final part of our discussion. Thanks a lot. Thanks to the panelists. Big thanks to everyone participating in the discussion and the moderator. We will need to prepare the stage for the next speaker. We need a couple of seconds, maybe a minute. I'd like to invite our foreign partner. He's a governing partner of Architectural Resources Group, that is part of the Center for Innovation. Architectural Resources Group provides services in architecture and city building, and they have a huge experience in preserving historical heritage. This is the third time for David Vessel in Ukraine, and he has some good insight about what city does during the war and what is our foreign guests' point of view. Of course, we'll provide Ukrainian translation, so get ready for that, and it's going to be an interesting speaker. A couple of seconds. We'll appreciate if you finish your questionnaires, and please think about your questions. For the speaker, and we will have the next speaker, a special guest right after David. Ukrainian identity. So please welcome David Vessel, Ukrainian Identity and Rebuild and Social Contract.
David, the stage is yours.
Good afternoon. Before I begin, I'd like to say that the people I've met in Ukraine are both courageous and gracious. Under these circumstances, that is especially revealing about society. Thank you for being an example of strength and resilience to the world. This session focuses on a topic that may be more philosophical than what we have been discussing earlier. However, going forward, it may be an important component in undertaking a successful recovery. The topic of this session is Ukrainian identity and the social contract. I realize that many people here may have a deep knowledge of this topic and have been working very hard to preserve cultural heritage. For that reason, I hope you will bear with me as I make remarks on architecture, planning, and identity. And I also hope that perhaps there may be one or two points that are applicable today. When our group from the US boarded the overnight train from Warsaw,
Коли група американців сіла на потяг, який слідував з Варшави,
we met a resident of Kyiv who is an accomplished professional,
ми зустріли одного киянина, який був таким серйозним професіоналом.
a dentist and an owner of a clinic.
Це дантист, який також був власником цілої клініки.
In observing us, 3 Americans and a native Ukrainian speaker,
От він дивився от на нас, була група американців, в складі якої була така ж людина, яка вільно говорить українською.
she assumed that he was our guide and was taking us to Kyiv on an Instagram war tour.
І ця людина, ця жінка, насправді, вона подумала, що ось такі американці, які просто залучили такого гіда, який буде робити такий собі інстаграм-тур.
She bluntly told him what she thought of him taking us to Ukraine for such a tour.
І вона все, що вона думала про цю людину, вона йому все висловила. Все, що вона думає про цей тур.
He explained that the group was coming to discuss planning for rebuilding and sharing information.
Україномовний член цієї групи пояснив, що ця група йде в Україну і мета її – це забезпечити відновлення України і збирати інформацію.
And not taking photos of destruction.
Не для того, щоб будувати, точніше, робити фотографії зруйнованих будинків.
She asked if this was premature, as the war had not yet been won.
От, і вона сказала впевнені, тому що, чи є для цього час, чи слід для цього того.
And the answer was, if war ended tomorrow,
Відповідь була така: а якщо війна закінчиться завтра,
do we know if there is sufficient concrete to rebuild?
ми точно впевнені, що в нас для цього відбудування достатньо бетону.
This made an important point in a very simple way,
І це дуже просто, такий простий був аргумент.
how important it is to plan for recovery and rebuilding now and not to wait.
Тому наскільки важливо не чекати, а відразу планувати цю відбудову.
I know we all agree, and several have made this point earlier today.
Я думаю, всі погодитеся з цим, тому що вже було багато аргументів на цю користь раніше.
And I'm wondering, as a visitor, if most Ukrainians feel planning has started.
І мені цікаво, як людині, яка приїхала в Україну в гості, цікаво, що думають про це українці. Чи цей процес він вже почався?
But what about cultural heritage?
Але як щодо культурного спадку?
Does it have a place in this massive planning effort?
Чи є в цьому місце в процесі планування?
Some speakers have made reference to culture already.
Деякі з спікерів вже говорили про культуру.
Is there a way to recognize or retain Ukraine's cultural heritage as cities and towns are replanned and buildings are replaced or rebuilt?
Чи є спосіб врятувати культурну спадщину в той момент, коли відбувається відбудова, а деякі будинки навіть будуються з нуля?
Past experiences of post-war reconstruction in other countries
І є досвід інших країн, які займаються цією відбудовою.
have shown us that it is common for cultural heritage to be put off or forgotten during recovery.
Які показує нам, що іноді під час цього відбудування про культуру забувають або відкладаються.
Will that happen in Ukraine?
Чи це станеться в Україні?
Does it matter?
Чи це має значення для українців?
History has shown that the resilience of a people
Історія показує, що стійкість людей
and recovery has much to do with their shared cultural heritage.
у відновленні показує, що це пов'язано з культурним спадком.
So perhaps it does matter.
Тобто, можливо, значення це все ж таки має.
To Today, I'd like to touch on tangible cultural heritage, and then intangible cultural heritage, and finally, the social contract. When we discuss cultural heritage, we think of the country's most impressive structures. Libraries, museums, churches, monuments, and bridges. You see here behind me some of your country's architectural icons. In addition to historic structures such as these, in the last 20 years or so, there has been a recognition that geographic areas, referred to as cultural landscapes, the spaces around our buildings are also important statements of society. UNESCO defines cultural landscapes as the combined work of nature and man. Therefore, cultural heritage includes buildings and the landscape on which they are sited. Our physical cultural resources are often thought of as symbols of our nations. Sadly, some of Ukraine's important architecture representing history and culture have been damaged. As of today, there has been damage to 265 cultural sites, including 114 religious sites and 24 museums. However, none of the UNESCO World Heritage Sites in Ukraine have been harmed. And of course, the war has impacted cultural landscapes as well. And I'm sure you're much more familiar with this than I. There are different methods that the world has approached for the treatment of damaged cultural heritage by war. Different strategies for recovery were discussed earlier. For architectural icons, there are many different types of techniques. Some icons are faithfully rebuilt. Others have been patched or undergone remedial repair so that the form is restored. But the visual quality is interrupted. Some buildings have been left with damage in place and left as ruins and become monuments to the conflict. And another approach is for a significant intervention into the historic building fabric with a contemporary design and modern materials. The conservation of the historic and culturally significant icon buildings in Ukraine is not the focus right now. I trust that each of these significant structures that have been damaged will be thoughtfully repaired and preserved by Ukraine. With the help of many nations and NGOs who also value them. And from what I can tell in the last 72 hours that I've been here, it seems that some of this rebuilding and conservation has started already. This will certainly help in preserving Ukraine's identity. But the focus in this session today is recovery, cultural identity. And so we're going to leave the discussion of cultural icons and talk about intangible cultural heritage. Intangible cultural heritage is a way, and recognizing it, to weave in to the planning process the identity of a nation and find a way to recognize these traditions and customs as reconstruction is undertaken. Intangible cultural heritage can be defined as the customs, values, and traditions of a community. Incorporating intangible cultural heritage, or the culture of daily life, into city planning, design, and construction has been shown to be an important component for the success of the recovery. And this is not my conclusion, but the opinion of many who have studied post-war reconstruction. Ukraine is a large country, and there will necessarily be cultural variations from region to region. It is important that these regional characteristics are recognized as studies have shown that the best results happen when decisions about planning, reconstruction, and recovery are made at the local level. And this was also discussed earlier. I've been told that the government of municipalities is decentralized in Ukraine.
Мені сказали, що в Україні відбулася децентралізація органів влади.
Which some may see as an advantage in incorporating heritage planning into a larger recovery plan.
І можна з цього зробити висновок, що всі ці особливості цієї реформи, вони були включені в глобальний національний процес відбудови країни.
You see here historic photos of vernacular architecture as well as a family group portrait from 1905.
Тут ви бачите приклади фотографій різних архітектурних споруд і звичайне сімейне фото, яке було зроблено в 1905 році.
The family photo and the photo on the far right with the little boy and the traditional houses
І оце сімейне фото, а також крайня справа фото, на якому ви бачите дві фігури і якісь будівлі на задньому плані.
These were given to me, these photos, by my business partner when she heard that I was visiting Kyiv.
Ці фотографії мені надала моя бізнес-партнерка, яка почула, що я збираюся поїхати в Україну.
These people are her mother's family.
Ці люди – це її родичі.
And this evidence of their family's history and home in Ukraine has been carefully preserved.
Це свідчення про їхню попередню культурну спадщину дуже цінно і дорогоцінно зберігається в їхній родині за кордоном України.
This shows how they value their identity, their heritage, as most of us do.
Це показує, як вони дорожать своєю культурною спадщиною, так само, як і більшість із нас.
These photos remind us that no matter how humble the dwelling place,
Ці фотографії нам явно демонструють, що незалежно від того, якими простецькими не були б наші домівки,
our intangible cultural heritage is tied to our concept of home.
наша нематеріальна культурна спадщина завжди невід'ємно і невидимо пов'язана із нашим домом.
And our partner today, Dobrobat, rebuilds homes.
І наш партнер сьогоднішньої події, сьогодення Добробат, якраз і займаються відбудовою домівок.
Home is where our daily life is centered.
Тому що дім – це те, де відбувається основне наше життя,
From which our traditions spring and where we find rest.
звідки походять всі наші традиції, де ми знаходимо собі відпочинок.
It's intangible cultural heritage that provides the connection between communities and people.
Це нематеріальна культурна спадщина, яка надає зв'язок між людьми і їхніми громадами.
You heard architects earlier today
Сьогодні ви вже чули від архітекторів,
talking about how they begin a project.
як вони говорили про започаткування проєктів.
They research and they understand the community and the culture that they're about to serve.
Про необхідність проведення досліджень, щоб краще зрозуміти ті громади і люди, яким послужать ці проєкти.
A building is more than shelter when it reflects the culture of the inhabitants.
Будівля і домівка – це більше, ніж просто місце, де можна сховатися, оскільки воно передає дух тих людей, які там живуть.
It becomes a home.
Воно стає домівкою, домом.
Our home is who we are a people are, our heritage.
І ці наші домівки – це є наш спадок, це те, чим і ким ми є насправді.
And as you all know so well,
Як ви всі дуже добре знаєте,
even in dangerous circumstances, people find a way to stay in their homes.
навіть незважаючи на дуже складні загрозливі обставини, люди все-таки не хочуть покидати свої домівки, знаходять способи там залишитись.
And if forced to leave, they bring with them remembrances of their home, as my business partner's family did.
І навіть якщо вони вимушені виїжджати, покидати свої дома, все-таки вони забирають з собою якісь нагадування про свої домівки, як це зробив мій партнер завдяки цим фотографіям.
It has been observed that to recover means to reestablish the familiar, which heals the disruption of normal life.
Було таке спостереження, що відбудова відновлення – це означає побудувати такий ніби щит, який буде нести з собою асоціацію з тим, що тобі дуже знайоме.
People have an intense desire to immediately revive their traditions,
Люди мають завжди величезне бажання одразу відновити свої традиції
and routines of home life.
і рутини, звичайно, рутини свого сімейного життя.
One would hope that the planning and design of new homes for Ukraine will incorporate the best of residential design based on cultural heritage.
Ми дуже сподіваємося на те, що відбудова і відновлення України буде включати в себе найкращі практики проєктування житлових приміщень і територій.
So now we've made a distinction between tangible cultural icons and intangible culture.
Ми щойно говорили про відмінність між матеріальною і нематеріальною спадщиною.
City planning, landscape design, and architecture, if done well,
Містобудування, ландшафтне будування і проєктування, якщо все це відбувається на належному рівні,
can be responsive to and support intangible cultural heritage that is Ukraine.
можуть правильно відреагувати і підтримати саме те, що є культурною спадщиною України.
I'm showing some photos of buildings here in Ukraine that caught my eye when preparing for our visit.
Я хотів тут показати деякі світлини культурних будівель, які дуже привабили мою увагу, коли я готувався до приїзду сюди.
There's clearly a rich tradition of Ukrainian architecture, including that which has been built in the last 60 years.
Тут чітко присутня дуже багата культурна архітектурна традиція, яка чітко простежується навіть упродовж останніх 60 років.
I realize that some architecture may not be well regarded for its association with the recent past.
Я розумію, що деякі з цих будівель не надто тут людьми в Україні хваляться через те, що вони асоціюються з не дуже приємним спадком історичним.
We see here apartment buildings, single-family homes, and a theater for performances.
Тут ми бачимо і висотні будівлі, і невеличкі такі будинки, як котеджі, і навіть театральні будівлі.
I understand that almost 70% of Ukrainian population lives in apartment buildings.
Я розумію, що близько 70% українського населення проживають у квартирах висотних будинках.
But that many also have country retreats.
Але багато із них мають заміські дачі.
Ukrainians, it appears, find community in both urban and rural settings.
Україна здається дуже гарною спільнотою і з точки зору містобудування, і з того, що ми можемо побачити в селах.
Looking forward to the repair and construction to be undertaken,
І зараз, коли ми заглядаємо в майбутнє і плануємо відбудову на майбутнє,
what are the intangible cultural values that will keep Ukraine Ukrainian?
які ж нематеріальні культурні традиції та цінності зможуть гарантувати, що Україна залишиться Україною?
And what are the values of younger Ukrainian generations?
І які цінності молодого українського покоління?
What I see where I live in Silicon Valley
Що бачу я, живучи у Кремнієвій долині,
is that younger generations are shifting globally in their focus and looking outward
я бачу, що молоді люди переміщують фокус своєї уваги на такі більш всесвітні, глобальні тенденції.
as well as having an interest in preserving their cultural identity.
Але при цьому все-таки хочуть зберегти свою культурну ідентичність.
The use of technology such as social media does not recognize physical barriers such as borders as a separation between people.
Застосування таких технологій, як соціальні медіа, допомагають їм уникати кордонів.
Sustainable design, accessibility, and other socially conscious principles are important themes today.
Сталий дизайн проєктування і підхід до природнього такого використання різних матеріалів, все це стає на сьогоднішній день дуже важливими темами при містобудуванні.
I learned yesterday that Ukraine has adopted new standards for accessibility for the disabled.
І доступності. І я вчора дізнався про те, що Україна прийняла нові стандарти щодо доступності приміщень.
How will these principles of equity and sustainability become part of Ukraine's reconstruction.
Однак чи стаються принципи доступності і безбар'єрності приміщень повсемісно доступними в Україні,
together with recognition of cultural identity.
наряду із визнанням української культурної ідентичності?
And can there be a place for more outdoor spaces around apartment buildings?
Чи можна все-таки гарантувати, щоб навколо висотних будівель було більше простору до відпочинку?
More parks and cities or better design principles?
Щоб більше парків та міст будувалося і проєктувалося саме з огляду на такий принцип?
Information prepared by the World Bank, UN Habitat, and others
Інформацію підготували Світовий банк, UN Habitat та інші.
indicates that including intangible cultural heritage in reconstruction is frequently not considered an important priority.
Свідчить про те, що включення нематеріальної культурної спадщини частенько вважається не дуже важливим.
And I mentioned,
Планування міст.
and I mentioned that at the beginning.
Я про це вже говорив з самого початку.
But instead, articulating shared values and a community identity
Але натомість, якщо ми говоримо про спільні цінності і громадську ідентичність,
with local cultural variations,
яка при цьому має місцеві культурні варіантності,
recognizing it and incorporating it into planning and reconstruction,
коли ми визнаємо і включаємо це і в містобудування, і проєктування,
may be a very useful and unifying theme.
це може бути дуже корисним і об'єднуючим як тема.
Most people in this room are construction professionals, is my understanding.
Наскільки я розумію, більшість із присутніх це
Питання будуть до нього?
з питання
Питання будуть до нього.
будування будівельних справ.
And you all know about how important it is that planners, designers, and contractors
Всі ви добре знаєте, як містобудувальники, контрактники, підрядники
work together as a team for construction projects,
працюють разом як єдина команда, щоб здійснити будівельний проєкт.
or the project falls apart.
А інакше проєкт розвалиться на частини.
Or maybe that only happens in the United States.
А можливо, це не так, і це відбувається лише в Сполучених Штатах?
So finally, the social contract.
І нарешті суспільний договір.
As we know, this is an agreement between the people and their government that defines the right of duties of each.
Наскільки ми знаємо, це договір, який заключений між народом та урядом або державою, і кожен із в якому визначена роль кожного із цих двох.
And what we have been discussing,
І з того, що ми сьогодні обговорили,
perhaps this means clear communication from Ukrainians to their government
можливо, саме йдеться про те, щоб українці чітко заявили своїй державі, своєму уряду,
that good city planning and good architectural design for livable cities are the only options.
що хороше містобудування і проєктування, так, щоб у цих місцях було і приємно, і можливо жити, це єдиний варіант відбудови.
My perspective is
Мій погляд такий.
that Ukrainian architects
Українські архітектори
would be the best to undertake this.
були б найкращими, щоб здійснити цю справу.
I've been trying to understand the building permitting and commissioning process in Ukraine since we arrived in context with cultural heritage and good city planning.
Я намагався зрозуміти всі ці ліцензії, правила, стандарти, які існують в Україні з точки зору планування, перебудування, перебудови. З того часу, як приїхав сюди, в Україну,
I remain unclear about the process, to be honest.
і, чесно кажучи, я таки абсолютно нічогісінько не зрозумів.
I have heard that cities and I have heard that cities, towns, and villages in Ukraine have master plans or city plans.
Я чув про те, що українські міста, містечка і села завжди будуються за генеральним планом забудови.
In some cases, there are individual historic districts within these city plans.
Наскільки я знаю, деякі із цих міст завжди залишаються історичні райони.
I assume that there are also design guidelines that provide detailed information.
І я маю надію, що все-таки є такі структурні інструкції щодо того, як ці історичні центри не порушували проблемні забудови,
On preserving the character of these districts.
аби зберігся характер
So it may be that fulfilling the social contract starts
Можливо, коли буде здійснюватися все-таки втілення цього соціального договору,
with insisting that these existing plan and other documents are followed and that they represent the best in international community planning for Ukraine.
коли з'являться відповідні плани, документи, твердження цього, я дуже сподіваюся, що там буде включена найкраща світова практика.
I think it's almost time for me to go, but I'll end with this.
Я думаю, вже на часі мені йти з цієї сцени, але я хотів би завершити наступним.
This may require that planners, Ukrainian planners and architects with the proper credentials in sustainability and cultural heritage preservation be added to the staff of existing regulatory or review agencies.
Я дуже сподіваюся на те, що все-таки до існуючих регуляторних відомств і агенцій мають додатися архітектори, проєктувальники, містобудівельники, які мають відповідні навчання і освіту для того, щоб зуміти зберегти культурну спадщину і передати її через наступні будівельні роботи для поколінь, що житимуть після нас.
At all levels,
На всіх рівнях.
and especially with recovery planning.
Особливо зараз, коли ми говоримо про відбудову і плани щодо цього.
These are just a few of ideas for consideration in the goal of preserving cultural heritage as Ukraine recovers and rebuilds.
Це лише деякі зауваження з мого боку з точки зору того, як все-таки слід Україні підходити до відбудови і відновлення, включаючи аспект культурної, матеріальної і нематеріальної спадщини.
Thank you for your attention.
Дуже дякую за увагу.
Thank you for you, David. Thank you for your speech. Thank you. Отже, друзі,
So, friends, thank you, David. And now, without further ado, advisor of the head of the presidential office, Mikhailo Podolyak. No. No DJ set. You want some? Well, first, hello. I came here with a great pleasure because what is rebuilding for me? I would say that when the war started, I saw that horizontal links start forming in Ukraine when society takes certain functions, those that the state couldn't take. By the way, today is the day of statehood, Ukrainian statehood. We're not structured yet, and sometimes the government can't respond to everyday challenges. But the society was the one to be able to take these challenges, and I saw people supporting each other on different level, and this is what rebuilding is about for me. So Russia tries, when they try to destroy infrastructure, they think if we destroy the energy infrastructure, there is no country. But they don't realize you can't really destroy something that is being rebuilt all the time continuously. You can see how society is engaged to ensure defense on different levels, like in Kyiv Oblast, how the society helps people who lost everything. Now there's a whole industry called rebuilding. I've heard a very nice speech where it was mentioned that regulatory bodies are pretty bad, and that's true. Sometimes they're just thinking about their own profit. They know how these future cities should look like, but I'm not sure I can talk about how these cities should look like architecturally. And this is a professional discussion, and all discussions in Ukraine, they are all professionals because, people know a lot. People who write comments in social media, they have lots of different ideas, but they don't know how to implement that. I have no doubt that after the war, Ukraine will look differently, a lot better than it used to be. I understand that it's been 70 months of war. Do you know what it means today? It's more than the Second World War in terms of time pace. Just like a dollar, just like, 20 years ago, and now the price for a dollar is different, right? It's like the inflation and everything. Same thing happens with time. And 17 months today is a long time. A time long enough to realize what kind of country we want to see after the war, and not only with regulatory functions on the state, but also in terms of the influence from the society. They should have the capacity, but not capacity to talk about something, but doing something, because on the horizontal level it looks different. And it's great that you keep thinking about that today. You keep thinking about how new Ukrainian economy should look like. Like, do we need these old industries that were, or enterprises that were destroyed by Russia? Should we rebuild them, or should we create them from scratch? And how our cities should look like? And let's be honest, they're not really comfortable. We need to rebuild them. These resources available? That's the third question. And who's going to coordinate resource funding? Will our partners trust us 100% in terms of what we want to rebuild? And the first component that is very important, the government should not be afraid to talk to the society. I mean, they should not be afraid to answer hard questions. And that's a hard thing to do. The government tries to avoid that. They avoid answering questions like, where's the money? Why did you choose that particular project? Do I have anything to do with these people? But that's going to change, and I think you can feel that. Or not. What do you want? If Ukrainian wants something really bad, it happens. We're not Russia. You understand, we have discussion. And it's different now, and after the war, it's going to look very different because the society will have the mandate. This is what makes a subject out of the state. The society will be a partner, and this will mean that it's not about the Ministry of Construction. We like to create institutions that look nice, we just create a ministry, and then we say, this is how we're going to build it. That's not going to work. Everything is going to work in a different way, and this is when the communities will take more responsibility and they will be engaged in the creative part, influencing how these cities and their relations will look like. Now I want your questions. I don't want to keep you any further here. I actually forgot to express my appreciation to Rostislav Smirnov. He's not here. I came here to give him a hug because I remember during the first weeks of war, I remember who did what. And I don't remember everything. There's a lot that happened, and I remember what he did during the first days of war, and this is why I'm here. Well, it's good that he found the time. Why don't they have this text for me to read? We don't have that. We improvise totally. So thanks a lot, and Rostislav will keep doing a lot for us, and we will keep doing that in different regions. And thank you. And the first question, can I ask you the first question? And then, yeah, you're using your position, I guess. And this is what I'll do. If I have enough time, I will ask the last question. So what about your questions? Do we have any questions in the audience? Hello, my name is Mariana. My question is the following. During the previous panel discussion, we raised an issue of building enterprises and factories, and they mentioned building of ammunition factories. Okay, so what about that? When are you going to build military industrial factories, and will officials bear responsibility for the fact that during this 10th year of war we don't have a factory like that? That's a pretty complicated question. Well, I will answer using a question. Do many people have a responsibility, people who have a great presentation and they do nothing and they quit? But after they quit, they become advisors and people who become the ones to, be advisors. We don't have military production, modern military production right now. We have designs, we have projects that are competitive, we have experimental samples of weaponry. We don't have many of them, but there is no massive production. And it's not a matter of ammunition factory. I'm also talking about producing shells and other types of ammunition. I'm not even talking about modern armored vehicles. We focused on producing old Soviet types and maintaining them. And they used to sell it in Africa. You're asking a question about how huge industry should look like, military production. Because after the war, it should become a premium industry, because people will invest a lot into buying these military samples. What about Ukraine? 10 years ago, we sold and maintained weapons, but it was Soviet weapons, and we didn't scale it up, we didn't expand this production, and we did nothing for the past 10 years. Since 2014, we had a war, but people thought that we will just talk about it. We'll talk about us as patriots, but we're not going to invest money into a production system. And now we replaced the leadership of the state military production enterprise, and we'll see if the new management will, how much time they're going to have, 520 days. I'm not sure if the war will last as long. I hope it won't, because this is a pretty long war, but we'll see if we'll have the right production, but I don't have any doubt that we will have that production. Dmitro Yarashchuk, Institute of Geochemistry and Natural Resources, National Academy of Sciences. The President's office approved the Academy of Sciences Development strategy. Will we get any funding? And I'm also talking about ammunition. I'm also talking about missiles. I'm talking about agricultural production. If we had some state order system, we will be able to say if we can respond to that. If we don't invest into knowledge, if we don't invest into Academy of Sciences, we don't have anything. fundamental investments. We need to invest into science. We are lagging behind on the competitive market. You know, Russia is not a technological state, and so we aren't. We are not a technological state that can be competitive on the global market of technology. Of course, the state will order products because we can invest. We can select certain industries and then we can invest money to dominate there. Or we have to purchase everything. But in that case, you are dependent on the situation on the market, having a great level of subjectivity because of the war. We can't afford that, and this is where the foundations of our state are laid. We can't rely on the availability of these technologies outside, but we need to prioritize these investments. We can't just prioritize into random things. The second problem is that today the budget is a deficit budget. Whatever we accumulate on economical market, we invest that into the army, and I'm also talking about salaries. We purchase additional ammunition apart from the heavy weaponry that we receive from the partners. So the money that we receive from our partners, it's allocated for social programs, including salaries and pensions and so on. Investment you're talking about, and it should be comparable with global investments in other countries. Today, that's impossible thing to do, and tomorrow it should be the necessary component. And I guess we will discuss that with the Cabinet of Ministers and the Office of the President and the Academy of Sciences. Thank you. Any other questions? You asked about mineralogy. When you introduced yourself, I was like, what? Yeah, I understand that. We can talk about green energy, but I can't answer all of your questions. Hello. I would like to say thanks for being with President a year ago, and I would like to ask you this question. I know the amount of work for the President, and you're the advisor. The question is, when are you going to take Alexei Arestovich to the presidential office? I'm not responsible for human resources. Maybe somebody is going to do that, but so far Alexei is doing his job. I mean, he's positively talking about things that should be talked about positively. He can talk about things that I can't talk about. He's very pro-government and he's very efficient, and I'm very positive about him, especially during the first months of war. He did a very good job because it was really hard back then. Now it's been a year and a half. Now there are lots of people that say that it was easy to do, but I remember the first weeks after the war started, people didn't want to take responsibility and say something publicly, and Alexei did that, and I appreciate that. But will they return him to the office? That's not up to me. And speaking about the president and the amount of work, that's the president. He sleeps for 4 hours every day, and he still does that, and he's unhappy when you don't do enough. And we were lucky. And I had to go there 7 o'clock in the morning last year, 24th of February. I couldn't get through because we're driving in the opposite direction. There were lines of cars. And when I arrived, what I wanted to see in the president's eyes is that he understands what's going on. And Was that the look that people had in 2014 that decided that we should not fight for our territories? And this is when I understood that we are going to work 24/7, and I think that's going to be the case until the end of the war.
Good evening. My name is Konstantin Kolesnikov. I'm a representative of Kyiv Strategic Community and the Association of Ukrainian Architects. A lot of people today have mentioned that we don't have the strategy for Ukraine. I would rephrase it. We don't have the institute of strategizing, not the institution, but not the institute, but the institution. So when will we have the strategy for the future Ukraine? And another derivative of this question is, when shall we have the strategy for the spatial development of Ukraine? If futurologists begin to speak here, this is cool indeed. Awesome. But in earnest, when talking about strategizing, and we have multiple strategies in presentations, and I like it that people can make high-quality presentations, fundamental one concerning what Ukraine will look like in 2025, 2030, and further on. But the only thing is, after we look into these strategies, I will take it a bit in a couple of minutes about these institutions, because for me it's more important to have other institutions in place. But anyway, when you look at these presentations, you always end up having a questions. Operationally, is anyone ready to invest in making this into a reality? All of them are just ready to prepare presentations, but once you enable them to go and work on that, it turns out that they don't have what it means to work in terms of governance, how this all works at different stages. This is the problem of Ukraine. A great many presentations, and in terms of implementing both at the governmental level and societal level, this is the case. I'm very much sympathetic of the volunteering movement of Ukraine, because I can see a lot of operational work at different levels. It's something that the governance in Ukraine sorely needs. But when talking about institutions in Ukraine, I would like to end up having an institution of studying Russia. Ukraine never knew what Russia was like before 2014, and even before the breakup of this full-scale invasion, we didn't know much about the Russian Federation either. We would just say we're different, but we never knew why and to what extent. So without having this institution of studying the Russian Federation or Europe, we do not fundamentally understand. We just intuit and construe what we need to say in terms of propaganda or counter-propaganda. But when you say what the vision concerning the strategy of Ukraine's vision for the future should be, it's the next step. Once you have studied your opponents, your antagonists, or potential partners, only then can you understand the competencies that may prove important both for Ukraine and our partners, that can prevent us from having this inroads and incursions that Russia is right now exercises. And do you know why we don't have it? Let me explain it. It's a paradox, but anyway. This is the complex of inferiority that we have lived under for 30 years, because we used to believe that we have to go somewhere and sit somewhere in the reception area, like the European Union. You understand what I'm on about, right? Because right now we are building a new skeleton of a new state that wants to be a partner, the state that wants to enjoy egalitarian relations. And in order to enjoy this egalitarian relationship, we will have to get rid of this inferiority complex of being given instructions to. But instead, we have to understand what kind of a country we are, what cutting edge we have, competitive advantages we enjoy, and in what way we are qualitatively different from other countries globally. And this speaks in favor of true sovereignty. By the way, one of the causes of this war's eruption, something that we have to comprehend, our partners nowadays, who are part of this anti-Russian coalition, before this full-scale invasion, subconsciously had been thinking that post-Soviet countries do not enjoy 100% sovereignty or subject status. So Russia was entitled to telling us whether we could become independent in our decision-making concerning either being pro-Russian or pro-European. So right now there is this Ukrainian entity which is growing, entity understanding. And here you're right, we need to develop this creative skeleton of the Ukrainian nation, which will clearly have to identify what is Ukraine, how we are different from Russians, and what the strategy should be like in terms of business, economy, budgeting, for, let's say, the upcoming 15 years. Thank you. Another question? Mr. Mikhailov, you're responsible most for the segment of informational policies at the presidential office. In this conjunction, the following question. What is the vision for the strategy to handle the information crisis in our country that we have unfolding right now? I mean, the press is being folded down, TV news coverage, apart from the telethon, which is promoted by the authorities. Without full-fledged, adequate information policy, no victory is possible. And alternative opinions. A very fine question. Again, you're reverting to this, to strategizing. You know, I have 3 special traits which I value much. First of all, I value transparency and I'm in favor of discussions. That is to say, it's easy for me to mix and mingle with people and answer different questions. And basically, in our country, in the government authorities, I would like the people to be like that, particularly the Minister of Culture. It's a political office. Somebody has to be very savvy about their subject, topics, and has to be well-equipped to talk and engage in dialogues with different cultural communities. Unfortunately, now in Ukraine, we don't have it. There is no institution of political speakers who at the same time would be officials. Unfortunately, the government still continues to cover itself under different guises of press releases, etc. However, transparency is about professionalism, depth of knowledge in different fields, and we will be trying to change that around. Secondly, I don't believe that there are anything like the press, television, or the media. We have a huge space instead, where you can create your own content, and if it's made professionally, you will enjoy thousands of views on YouTube, and you will be dominating in this information space. On the contrary, on old decisions and solutions. If you base your future activities on that, they will be just dying out. Concerning the telethon, this is the peculiarity of the time we are living through. Particularly in the first months of the war, we had to focus a certain amount of information in a particular spot in order to prevent panicking. This is the third component. The uniqueness of Ukraine lies in the fact that even despite the war, on and off in our internal market, we have huge information hypes erupting. It doesn't matter whether it's genuine scoops and materials or it's compromising materials, and at the expense of these hypes, because these hypes are not dominating, we can control the information component more or less. We haven't implemented censorship, have we? In addition to the 6 channels which are in this single marathon, there are multiple channels on YouTube, like 24th channel, Lviv channel, where I personally do interviews on a weekly basis. It enjoys up to 3 billion views per month. That is to say, it's much more than all of the 6 TV channels participating in this telethon altogether. So nowadays, there are multiple instruments of discussion and competing in this informational space. It's not about the platform. The matter is about whether the product that you are making is highly professional, because some people who enter the space and mean to be quoted, they say they think the main idea is to offend the president or insult him, and they think it's enough for them to become a public speaker. It isn't so. It's a matter of professionalism. And another trait of mine, I very much value professionals. I believe that professional journalists, when people put their name under a particular article and they're savvy about whatever they're writing about, it's much more important than staying or remaining anonymous in a particular Telegram channel and just creating a lot of hype. I'm a proponent of classic journalism, just like I like it when you read paper books. Although I think that nowadays we read predominantly electronic books. And I also have to download my books because it's impossible to carry paper books when you travel. But at home I have a great number of different paper-binded books, and whenever I'm alone and I shut my doors, I shut myself in, and I just read, and everyone in my house knows that I'm reading paper books. Another question, please. Strong health to you, Oleg Holenka, the Center of Municipal Management. Representative, my question is, Mr. Podolak, does your team understand the risks related to PTSD and the issue of the ex-combatants' resocialization? And I hope that with God's help in April next year, we will achieve sustainable peace. So far, I can see that at the level of local authorities and executive central authorities, for the sake of resocialization, not much is being done, because resocialization without creating jobs is next to nothing in terms of efficiency. Thank you so much. Unless you are a futurologist, but someone who understands mathematical analysis, and you say when exactly you think the war is over, this is stupendous. Secondly, I couldn't agree more concerning the mental health of the huge number of people who will be getting back from the front line, because they are already accustomed to certain ways of behaving. It will be difficult for them to get reintegrated. And just as you put it rightly, unless the economy offers them jobs to provide for a decent living for themselves, this will be highly problematic. The question is if everyone is cautious of that. No. You and I have lived in Ukraine for a long time. We understand that many people's competencies are not in line with the offices that they are holding. We understand that rebuilding it's all on the go. When provisionally we understand that 1 million people directly or indirectly will be coming back from war, and they will have to receive other skills, other types of jobs, and other kind of social relations or social support. There are some people who understand that, and First Lady's office is taking care of mental health issues, because there are people who will be coming back from the front line, and there are their family members, especially those who have lost their nearest and dearest. Also children who have lost their parents due to war. Some of them have only one parent, others don't have any relatives at all. So there is a program already. A number of people have this understanding. However, another cohort of people still needs some talking to be done to them. And this is a great deal of work. And it's not just about establishing centers of psychosocial support, where you will have some deputies responsible for these areas in regional administrations, and they will approach these issues in a nominal way, having a particular number of hours to work. No, this will be another group of officials who will have to respect the people who have protected the country's sovereignty. There has to be logistical understanding concerning where we will get these people from and to. Then there has to be clear understanding who needs to be competent to diagnose in a preventive way where this PTSR starts and ends. But is the government ready for that? No. Just like any other multiple challenges that we are not ready for, we will still be addressing them on the go, regrettably and sadly. Let me give you another example, and I think it's going to be rather indicative. Take the US, for example. After the end of the Vietnam War, you remember that, 1972, You remember what was happening at the time? If you don't understand what I'm referring to, Born on the 4th of July, the film with Tom Cruise, shot by Francis Ford Coppola, you will be able to see what, in mental terms, people were going through, the people who were not fighting this war inside their country, the people who didn't see their homes ruined, and their families were not forced to migrate. Only after the end of the war did they begin to build a system of medical and mental support. Ukraine will have to do the same. Of course, mistakes will be committed, but at least you will have to start doing that. You are asking this question, so that means there are some conscious people, conscious and aware of the risks that we will be faced with after the war. Thank you. We have two last questions to answer. We don't have any censorship in place. I'm not going to ask my own question. No, we want to hear you anyway. Okay, one question from the audience, and mine will be the last one. Ukraine, Victor Medved, the investment company representative. Right from the start, there were quite a few speakers talking about communications, so this triangle: communities, businesses, and central authorities. During each of the panels today, we had questions relating to that because there is no due synchronization. They're not working in sync. So can you see any ways to improve these communications? Thank you. You always want me to give you some negative answers, don't you? No, I don't. Personally, for me, there are evident gaps concerning proper communications at different levels between state-owned institutions and businesses and CSOs and NGOs. Surely there are problems in this regard, but Rostislav Shaurma, deputy head of the presidential administration, runs weekly meetings with representatives of businesses, business associations concerning additional amendments to be introduced to regulatory acts. By the way, there is another deputy to the head of the presidential administration, Mr. Tatarov, answering questions concerning whether or not we can diminish repressive pressure exerted on the representatives of SMEs, because talking about big oligarchy business, of course, this pressure needs to be increased. But whether I'm happy with the level of communications between the government and other entities, definitely not. If I were, I would probably be sitting in my office or room reading paper books, because everything would be running smoothly. As long as you see me, it means things are not working perfectly. As long as I disappear, it will mean that things begin to work smoothly and properly. One more question, please. Someone has been raising their hand. Why are you asking me? You are moderating that. Pachapsky Maxim, the city of Kharkiv, because we're talking about recovery here. So the question to you about, I would like to get your thoughts concerning the universal Ukrainian construction systems that would join the efforts of urban planners, builders, and businesses to make the rebuilding and recovery of Ukraine speedier. Something individual and typical at the same time. Are there any such ideas, something that would contribute to investors coming to Ukraine, wanting to come here and build cool accommodation compliant with contemporary European standards? Any platform decisions of the kind enjoy my approval, but let me just make some remarks. I wouldn't like to have three chieftains there, right? So at least that the people could find common ground, be on the same page, instead of killing each other over their viewpoints. Secondly, reverting to communications. You have to explain very qualitatively to the community, to the society, what exactly they have developed, because you see, the society always knows what kind of investors have to be attracted, and instead what kind of investors we manage to attract. Not everyone is ready to that. When society begins to exert their pressure and hate you, people break down. And the third component for me to provide my expert assessment, I have to see the people who are behind this platform for me to hear what it's all about. Because just to say, guys, this is awesome, I cannot physically afford it. Because I always want to immerse myself in a particular topic or a matter to be able to communicate with these people and explain to them why this platform is rendered efficient or inefficient. Oh, we seem to have more than 2 questions, as you promised. Association of the Novel Transportation Infrastructure. A year ago, our president at the summit of the initiative of the Three Seas initiative, asked for Ukraine to be accessed to this initiative. We received the status of aspirant member. In a month, we're going to have another meeting of this initiative. We had multiple proposals issued, so what does the office have to think about it right now, and what is being done in order to enable this platform? You mean the platform? Who initiated this platform? The president of Ukraine. He spoke at the summit. 12 countries of this initiative were presented. They are the eastern flank of NATO, the countries that hosted the majority of our refugees, and they're helping us in the mostly in terms of humanitarian issues. And there are the ports located that help us to take out grain from Ukraine.
We'll do it like that, Max. You can take my phone number and we can discuss that professionally. I'm not ready to tell you what was done legally. I just want to get some updates about the progress. I guess that they didn't do everything that was supposed to do. I already rephrased my question because people already asked relevant things. Just do the 4th time and it's going to be fine. Okay, how do you need to communicate in terms of reconstruction so to ensure more support around the world? Wow. Get me a Nobel Prize here. Well, it's very hard to communicate around the world. I mean, one thing is to have a start of the war that shocked the democratic world. I mean, countries whose one of the values is human life, and they started helping Ukraine. And they've been looking for possibilities. Now countries are getting back to their problems because it's more relevant to them and they want to change a lot of things within their countries. They don't have that shock and that fear anymore. They do understand that Russia is a myth. They have certain resources, but they're not going to join Europe. They won't interfere Europeans anymore. There is no fear anymore, and there is no shock because they've been attacking us with guided missiles. So it was a shock first time, and the second time, and third time, and then they realize, okay, this is Ukrainians. They're singing songs in their shelters, and they're starting in their shelters, and they have a different attitude. So it will be harder to communicate it to them. And the third component is corruption. They created this image of a corrupted country. A part of this is true. We have a big state with lots of functions, and these bureaucrats they're being monetizing their functions, and we can fight corruption. We can finish with corruptions if we minimize the government. And this image, corruption image, it affects our positions on the global market. So you will need to go and explain that you're good and nice and you are professionals, and you have to keep the fight because they will be looking at you saying, yo, you're a corruption, and you will have to prove to them that you're not. And then after that, they will get back and keep saying that, and you have to reiterate that they're not corrupt. And how can you do that? Number one, you will need to show how competent you are, not just talking and making presentations. You need to show specific plans with every step explained, and also expert justification of that funding. And you have to justify every step, and you have to ensure audits, and you have to provide intermediate reports. I'm not doing a lecture here about how you need to present yourself on the foreign markets. Thanks a lot. So no censorship, everything is open, and those who wanted to ask a question, yeah, no censorship here, wherever I am. Thanks a lot. I would like to invite Margie here for the final word. Dear partners, colleagues, I would like to express my appreciations for being here, for having a discussion, for asking questions. And I'm sure that until we meet again, we'll keep reforming and rebuilding our country.
This has been an amazing day for your friends from San Francisco. Here, amid the pain and grief of your war, we feel the heroic goodness that people are capable of. And the hidden strength from which we can all draw in times of enormous pain. To our international audience live streaming this event, I'd like to repeat, Ukrainian reconstruction effort will be the biggest opportunity for building innovation since World War II.
Хочу сказати, що Україна буде відбудовувати себе, і це чудова можливість залучати технології і інновації.
This initiative is the greatest moment for the world.
Ця ініціатива є чудовим і найвеличнішим моментом для всього світу.
Lessons learned will shape the future of building worldwide. To our Ukrainian friends in the audience and listening from afar, as we go forward, the Center for Innovation will continue to engage with Dobrobat and all of you. We have a couple of initiatives we would like to announce today. First, we have academic and technical resources offered by American universities that we will share with you. Many of these resources are in English, and they will require translation into Ukrainian. If you can help with translation, especially if you are familiar with design and construction, please connect with Dobrobat. Documents include UC Berkeley's Lean Construction Glossary, and access to the Lean Construction blog, the #1 resource for lean construction in the world. Second, the Center for Innovation is sponsoring a study tour to the San Francisco Bay Area.
Також центр інновацій займається спонсоруванням візиту в затоку міста Сан-Франциско.
From October 27 to November 4.
З 27 жовтня до 4 листопада буде проходити цей візит.
On this trip, we will visit industrialized construction factories,
Під час цього візиту буде відвідування фабрик індустріального виробництва.
see advanced robotics,
Також буде фабрика, яка займається робототехнічним будівництвом.
and visit groundbreaking technology companies,
І також будуть візити на компанії, які також займаються інноваційними технологіями.
including one whose technology is probably in your pocket now.
Включаючи компанію, яка, мабуть, долучилася до створення пристроїв, які зараз перебувають у ваших кишенях.
This is a working trip.
Це робочий тур.
Participants will visit UC Berkeley, Stanford University, technology companies, and construction sites.
Ці учасники цього візиту будуть відвідувати університет Стенфорду, Берклі, різні компанії і майданчики з будівництва.
You will meet some of the most innovative thinkers in design and construction and related technologies.
Ви зустрінетеся з провідними особами у галузі архітектури, будівництва.
This trip is open to builders, designers, government officials, and citizens.
Цей візит відкритий для всіх представників урядових організацій, архітекторів, професіоналів і звичайних громадян.
If you're interested in participating, please apply on the Dobrobat website. There's an application form there.
Якщо вас зацікавила ця пропозиція, будь ласка, зверніться на веб-сайт Добробату, і там є форма, яку ви можете заповнити.
On behalf of the Board of Directors for the Center for Innovation, I can't tell you what an honor it's been to spend this day with all of you.
Від імені Ради директорів Центру інновацій я навіть не можу повністю висловити, наскільки я щаслива тим, що я зараз сиджу перед вами.
I'd like to extend my thanks to my colleagues. You've met David Wessel earlier today, but also Nico Suvorov and Dean Reed.
Хочу також висловити свою подячність Девіду Весселу, Ніку Суфрову і Діну Ріду.
And I'd also like to thank Andrei Lashtov. We spent many mornings in California and evenings here in Ukraine preparing for this event.
Також хочу подякувати Андрію Лаштанову, з яким ми багато часу провели і також займалися організацією цієї події.
To all of you in the audience here tonight, you have challenged the darkest of days with the brilliance of light.
Я хочу також звернутися до всіх, хто присутній тут. Ви надали оце світло в кінці тунелю, цей тяжкий і темний час.
Your optimism and wholehearted embrace of the challenge of reconstruction will be the inspiration to the world.
Ваш оптимізм і ваше бажання долучитися до процесу відновлення країни, воно буде надихатись весь світ.
Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава!
Glory to the heroes.
Many thanks for Center for Innovation and for Sitelinks. Many thanks for standing with Ukraine. Дякую всім, друзі.
Thanks a lot, my friends, and I guess we can wrap it up, but we're not saying farewell. We will keep meeting, and I suggest that we continue our networking in the whole room. See you next time. Thank you very much.